Live from Calgary, welcome to the Globe and Mail Leaders Debate 2015. Please welcome tonight's co-host, Globe and Mail political reporter Jane Tabor.
Welcome to the Globe and Mail Leaders Debate on the Economy, and welcome to Calgary in the Palomino Room at the BMO Centre in Stampede Park for a very special and exciting debate, one that's focused on only one topic, the most important issue of election 2015, the economy. And there's no better place for this debate than where we are tonight in Alberta. Very rarely have federal leaders' election debates taken place outside of central Canada, but we felt it was important to hold our debate in this province, which has been the barometer for the country's economy. So, to help me set the scene for tonight's event, I'm joined by some familiar Globe and Mail faces. Paul Waldie is the editor of the Report on Business. Kelly Kreiderman is one of our business reporters in Calgary. And Adam Radwanski is our national political columnist. So hello, and let's get started. And we're going to start with Adam. Adam, what are you expecting tonight, and what should we be watching for?
I think it's going to be a little different from what we've seen in leaders' debates past. I mean, usually the construct here is that we see the two or three or however many non-incumbents going hard at the incumbent. In this case, it's kind of a free-for-all in this campaign. I mean, you've got all parties polling in roughly the same areas, and I think you're going to see them really going hard at each other. I think you also have to hope, of course, that this being all on the economy instead of an array of topics, that hopefully they'll get a little past the talking points and actually have to really delve into the issues. Yeah,
30-30-30 basically is what we're seeing in the polls, Paul. And so what are you expecting?
Well, I tell you what, Jane, I don't know about you, but I just hope this debate is a heck of a lot more interesting than the one we saw last time. That first debate in the first week of August, it was boring. None of the leaders impressed me at all. So I'll give them a free pass on that one because it was so early in the campaign. But I want to see some life and some fire this time around. And I want to see them address two key issues, Jane. I want to see them talk about unemployment and employment in this country. There's 1.3 million Canadians out of work, more than that actually. And a lot of people who are working in pretty unsatisfactory jobs. Wage rates haven't kept up with inflation for many, many years. So I want to see what they have to say about that. The second thing I want to hear some serious answers on is household debt. Canadians owe something like $1.8 trillion. It's higher than ever. It's going up at a rapid rate. That affects house prices. That affects consumer spending. That affects so many parts of our economy. So I'm going to see if they have any answers to that.
Okay, and Kelly, you live here in Alberta. You live here in Calgary. You see what the situation is. What are you expecting Albertans to hear? What do you think Albertans hope to hear from the three leaders tonight?
Well, I think when you're talking about economic uncertainty, Calgary is a good starting point. We're seeing a lot of sleepless nights from a lot of people, a lot of job losses, and people are expecting more as oil stays lower for longer, as the parlance right now. You're seeing people worried about their mortgages, worried about their debt. Albertans are some of the most indebted people in Canada. So I think people are going to be looking for policies that speak to them. All economics really for elections, what matters is personal, and I think they're going to be looking for some kind of reassurance.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what we've heard from the leaders so far, and we'll talk about the budget issue and balanced budgets. Adam, Conservative leader Stephen Harper and Thomas Mulcair, the NDP leader, have talked about balancing budgets. What do you think about that? Realistic plans? Where are you on that?
Well, I don't think it's a great surprise that Mr. Harper's talking about that. I mean, he's been building to this for 4 years. We all knew he was going to run on a balanced budget now, and he wasn't going to be swayed from that. I don't think he's that vulnerable on that. I mean, I know the other leaders have occasionally tried to poke a hole in that, but realistically, I don't think people seriously doubt that he's committed to that, or at least the most committed of these three leaders. Nobody's really going to question that. What's interesting, of course, is Mr. Mulcair's position, which goes so much against type with the NDP, goes against what the Liberals are running on, is clearly an attempt to assure people that it's not the same old NDP. But I do think you're going to see more attempts to question that. I mean, the NDP put out a costing document of sorts this week. I think the general consensus was, not exactly the most complete thing. Now, in fairness, there may be more to come. But I do think you're going to see questioning of that, and whether that means that, as the Liberals have suggested, that they really have that they're really committed to austerity, which one wonders about, or whether it means that, in fact, they would want to bring a deficit. Either way, I think you're going to see Mr. Mulcair somewhat pressed to explain how that's actually possible.
What do you think, Paul, about this
Well,
balanced budget issue?
I don't care about deficits. I care about the fundamental restructuring that our economy is going through that I don't think any of these leaders have got their heads around yet. This economy is very different than it was a year ago or even 6 months ago. We've got oil under $50 a barrel. It's probably going to stay under $50 a barrel, maybe for 5, 10, 15 years. That's a real change in the way Canada is structured. And I think they have to figure that out. That affects already manufacturing jobs. Our dollar is low. That's supposed to help our exports. It's not helping our exports because everybody else's currency is low. We're losing market share in the US to Mexico. It's not the same economy that it was, and I'm not hearing anything from these three leaders yet. I'm hoping tonight I will. That's going to explain how they're going to address that.
Okay, so Paul might not care about deficits, but I think a lot of people care about deficits, and Mr. Trudeau seems to care about deficits. And Adam, Mr. Trudeau's plan is to run,
He loves them.
Or he just doesn't care about them either. Either way.
He loves modest ones. To run 3 small deficits, to be able to invest in infrastructure to stimulate the economy. What do you think of that plan?
I think obviously it's an attempt at a point of differentiation. I think it came as a surprise. It did somewhat, although somewhat in keeping with the way that he'd been running before that in terms of talking about wanting to invest more, it did seem to contradict some of the things he'd said before. So I don't think it was a long-term, a long plan to say that. I don't think it's hurt him necessarily. I don't think, we've seen some polling data that suggests that a lot of people are okay with the idea of some deficits.
But they're not okay, the data that we saw today, in fact, in the Globe and Mail, talks about the fact they're not okay with Mr. Trudeau running that plan. They're okay with their plan, but not the person who's running it.
Right, and I think it's also a fair question of, okay, so is this, is it really only 3 years, really only 4 years, or as I think Mr. Harper in particular is going to suggest, is it a lot more than that? Does he really have a plan to get out of it? And I think what Mr. Mulcair is going to try to push, more than just talking about the evils of deficits, is, well, you just came to this, along with a bunch of other issues, he'll also try to do the same thing on, which he's been doing a lot on the campaign trail recently. I think you'll see Mr. Mulcair really going at perceived inconsistency and basically saying you can't trust this guy because he just suddenly decided he wants to run large deficits, which seem to come a bit out of nowhere.
Yeah,
but as the economy seems to worsen, I've heard some people say Mr. Trudeau is being the most honest about the country's finances. The OECD is predicting our growth will slow down next year. Obviously, the price of oil is still weighing on the federal government's finances, and some people are saying maybe he's just being the most realistic about what's going to happen.
Well, he hasn't been the most clear, right? Honest or realistic, whatever. He hasn't been very clear. I haven't heard a lot of details from those guys. The NDP's put out something of an economic plan, 7 pages, not a lot, but at least there's something there. The government has its plan, has what they've done in the past few years, but I've seen very little from Trudeau and the Liberals, and I'm hoping to hear some more tonight, a little bit more detail on what exactly they plan for this thing. So far, it's been pretty empty.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of the issues that David Walmsley is going to be asking the leaders tonight. And one of the issues is about energy and the environment. And Kelly, you're in a good place to talk about that and to talk about, what you expect the leaders to say about that, especially on the pipeline issue.
Well, I think, we know that Mr. Harper has been generally pro-pipeline, I think, and he's received criticism from the other leaders for that. And we see Mr. Trudeau trying to walk a delicate balance between the environment and the economy. And even in the last debate, he did, it seemed, make the attempt to speak to Albertans and say that, part of the reason that you're not able to export your oil is because Canada's reputation has been damaged. And I don't know if that argument will play, that people really believe Canada has the control over, Keystone XL or the ability of other countries to approve pipelines or not. So Mr. Mulcair has been, he approves of some pipelines and doesn't approve of others. So.
And getting back to the price of oil, there's lots of folks who say, do we really need any of these pipelines if oil's going to stay under $50 a barrel? And I think those are the questions people in the U.S. are starting to ask about Keystone. And along with the environmental issues, there's economic issues here. Why bother if we're not going to have oil, if we're going to have oil sitting at $45 or even lower in the years to come?
Yeah, Adam?
And one of the particularly tricky aspects here, there will be other debates that are in French primarily, but one that really matters in terms of Quebec is the Energy East pipeline.
Exactly.
And that's one where Mr. Mulcair in particular has been trying to walk a very difficult balance in that, the one issue that the Bloc Québécois thinks it can make hay over, one of the very few, is that the NDP is not sufficiently opposed to a pipeline that would go through Quebec, relative to being opposed to other pipelines.
Of course, Energy East is going through Quebec to New Brunswick.
To New Brunswick, that's right. So that's a potential vulnerability for him there. So he has indicated sort of being opposed to it, but not completely opposed to it, which the danger there is always that you kind of get the worst of both worlds from his perspective, and you wind up not being firm enough in Quebec, although it doesn't seem to have hurt him yet.
And
and also concerning people in this part of the country who would say, well, why is he opposed to every pipeline?
And the one thing, and I know lots of folks out here in this audience would argue this, that
Yeah.
the one thing about pipelines, and that's part of this debate, is all right, you don't build the pipelines, what do? You put that oil on trains, and how's that worked out for us, right?
But I think the big question is whether that's even an issue right now in this era of oil being under $50 a barrel, whether, you're seeing even the shipping on trains going down. And, I think the big question is for the leaders is how they address the energy economy and whether, they give any hope to people whose jobs are reliant on the energy sector.
Okay, that brings us to jobs, and that's another big topic and big focus of our evening tonight. Paul, on jobs.
Well, I just think the job market has changed so much, certainly from when I was a kid, and I know you're a lot younger than me, Jane, but part-time work then was much different. You were guaranteed hours, you kind of were guaranteed a wage, you kind of knew what you were doing. Now, the part-time world is so different. You've got these zero-hour things where people sit at home waiting to be called. You've got companies who now treat employees in the same way they treat supplies, just-in-time delivery, right? I'm only going to phone up Susie for work a minute before the shift because I know I'm going to need her, but I might not phone her, right? I think the nature of work has changed. I think wages haven't came up, as I've said before. And I think, once again, this is all part of this shift in the economy that I don't think the political parties have cottoned onto just yet.
Right, and one issue that we wanted to talk about was immigration, and that's something that David's going to be asking the leaders about too. So, Adam, on immigration.
Yeah, it's flown a little under the radar in this campaign, other than, of course, we've heard a lot about the refugee crisis, which is not really an economic issue. I don't think it's going to be, unless they decide to bring it up, I don't think it's going to be a big focus tonight. But I do think on immigration, in terms of the difference between economic migration and the more sort of traditional family reunification that we've also done in this country, both of the opposition parties have kind of quietly been trying to play that up in a lot of suburban areas where there's very large immigrant populations. People want to be able to, say, get their parents here. It's a little harder than it used to be because the priority is on economic migrants instead. I expect that we may see, although maybe they prefer to do it more quietly, but we may see Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Mulcair try to bring that up a little bit, as in there needs to be a better balance of that.
And I think, I think they might talk about the foreign worker program too, which has gotten a lot of attention for sort of the fast food places and that. But there's a lot of farmers out there who rely on foreign workers who can't get them now. There's a lot of small businesses out there, manufacturers who relied on foreign workers. They can't get them now, and that's a big issue.
Very controversial topic, so hopefully that will come out tonight. Now, I'm going to ask you guys about who has the most to lose. Quickly, Paul.
Well, in my mind, Trudeau has the most to lose. I thought he was terrible in the first debate. I don't care what the pundits say. I thought he looked like a high school kid. I think he has the most to lose if he comes in and pulling that off again. However, I also think he has the most to gain if he can at least show he's got a credible position. He knows his facts and figures about the economy. I think there's more upside for him just because, in my mind, he's starting from a negative base. However, though, I also think Harper has a lot to lose as well. This is his town. This is his debate. These are his issues. If he can't come out of this as a clear winner, then he's got a problem on his hands.
Okay, so don't sit on the fence like Paul. Kelly, could you tell us who you think who has the most to lose?
Yeah, I think that Harper has the most to lose if he doesn't have a stellar performance. Anything less than a stellar performance will be deemed a disappointment, I think. Expectations for Justin Trudeau will be higher this time. And Mr. Mulcair is going to have to explain his fiscal policy, and I think the other leaders are going to ask for more details. So if he's not able to shore up those details, it's going to be a problem for him.
Okay, Adam.
Yeah, I disagree with Paul that Mr. Trudeau was terrible last time. I thought he was on balance fairly good. But I agree.
The same debate,
well, but maybe the lower expectations worked on
Canada,
me.
you gotta love it. You like lines like
Adam wrote about that today too, about how the bar was so low. The expectations
the bar
were so
was definitely
low for Mr. Trudeau. Yeah.
And I think, look, I agree, I was going to say I disagree that he was terrible. I agree that I think he has the most to lose because I think the expectations are higher right now, and I think you've got the other parties have a real incentive to go very hard at him, the other leaders do. Because the Liberals have moved up to a point which neither other party can be very comfortable with. They're kind of hovering around 30% support in the national polls. And I think they're going to try to goad Mr. Trudeau into, it's not necessarily about having him on the defensive for an hour and a half. I mean, I hope that every voter in the country watches tonight. Some of them will not watch it live, hopefully very few. And what you have to do if you're the other leaders is try to create a clip, even if it's only a few seconds. And they all have to be a little careful with this because you can be defined by a few bad seconds. And Mr. Trudeau is maybe a little more susceptible to that, as we've seen on the campaign until now, in terms of just a quick offhand comment that can wind up actually defining his performance.
Okay, 10 seconds each. Who's going to ace the debate?
Well, Harper has to ace it, or it's terrible for him.
Okay, Kelly?
Justin Trudeau has to prove that the differentiation strategy is going to work for his
party.
So
he has to ace the debate. Justin Trudeau, you're saying?
Harper has to.
Harper, you're saying?
Mr. Trudeau has to, I think, at least do well, and he could win by not losing, but I think Mr. Mulcair will actually perform well. I have a feeling that last time he had trouble getting just the right tone.
Yeah.
I think they probably adjusted that.
He just has to hold his own, and he
Who,
comes out here
Mr.
fine.
Mulcair just has to hold his own?
No, I think
he has to win.
Expectations are low. The NDP can run the economy, so if he comes out of here showing that he can at least has his head around the economy, he's fine.
They released a fiscal plan yesterday. Mr. Mulcair has to provide more details.
Okay. That's it, guys. I want to thank you very much. Thanks, Kelly, Paul, and Adam. And in just a moment, the main event, David Walmsley and the 3 federal leaders. But first, let's hear what Canadians are thinking about the economy.
This election is about our economy.
Growing the economy.
Back to a balanced economy.
The Canadian economy will grow for the 7th straight year.
Clearly, Mr. Harper, your plan's not working.
This is a tougher economy than it needs to be.
The economy.
The economy.
Our economy.
My biggest concern about the Canadian economy
Economy is that we continue to focus on the oil and gas sector.
I won't be able to afford property in the city I want to live in.
My biggest concern for the economy is retirement income adequacy.
Our failure to invest in infrastructure for the future.
Stable employment opportunities for young people.
My biggest concern for the Canadian economy is getting Canada off oil.
The economy is the most critical ballot box issue facing voters in this federal election, making it the clear choice for the sole topic of the Globe and Mail's 2015 Leaders Debate.
Keep our economy moving forward.
Get the economy on track.
Turn this economy around.
If businesses were to be able to employ young people on a full-time basis with meaningful living wages, what are you going to do to help those companies remain competitive in a global economy?
The baby boomers, the largest age cohort in history, is transitioning into retirement, and with that, we need to ensure that they're well taken care of.
Given the widening gap between the wealthy and the rest of us, what specific measures will your government take to address this important issue?
I grew up thinking that one of the best investments you can make was in property. My grandparents did it, my parents did it, and I'm not able to.
Our leaders seem more focused on the old economy than the new economy.
This would be a perfect time to make bold investments in our collective future.
Now, please welcome tonight's debate moderator, Globe and Mail Editor-in-Chief David Walmsley.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Globe and Mail debate on the economy. We are coming to you live from Calgary with a studio audience, and they join you, our viewing audience, for the next 90 minutes as we discuss the key issues of this 2015 campaign. Let's welcome the 3 party leaders here tonight. From the Conservative Party, Stephen Harper. From the New Democratic Party, Thomas Mulcair. And from the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau. There is little doubt this election is about the economy. All parties, I think, can agree at least with that. And with the country struggling to find its economic mojo, we have some tough questions for the leaders this evening. The first half deals with 6 topics: jobs, energy and the environment, infrastructure, immigration, housing, and taxation. Each area will begin with a question from me to one of the 3 leaders, with a follow-up question to that same leader. I'll then push the question to a second leader for a quick answer before an open floor debate. None of the 3 leaders has advanced knowledge of the questions, only the broad themes. And the order of speaking and the positions on the stage were randomly drawn with party representatives. That's the housekeeping. Let's begin. The reason we are here tonight is to come to grips with this country's challenges. And the first question goes to you, Mr. Harper, and the question is on jobs. Canada is facing structural rather than cyclical change. Do you have a jobs plan for industry beyond taking things out of the ground?
Absolutely, David, but if you don't mind, let me just begin by saying, because we're in southern Alberta, I want to take a moment to give my condolences to the Blanchette and the Dunbar families on the terrible deaths of Haley and Terry. These are obviously senseless acts, and I know that everybody here across the country, our thoughts and prayers are with those families. On jobs, David, our approach is multifaceted. There's several things we're doing. Obviously, the centerpiece of our plan is to make sure we are making practical investments that are affordable, that we can do while keeping our taxes down and keeping our budget balanced. But there's a number of things we're doing, including, for instance, particular interventions in the labor market to make sure we're training people for the jobs that are available, orienting our immigration policy that way, encouraging innovation in our manufacturing sector, opening up trade markets. We've signed more trade agreements than ever before. There's a whole series of things we're doing, but the core to protecting our economy is making sure that our budgets remain balanced and our taxes remain down.
Your dream, though, of being an energy superpower have not been realized. For those who are worried about jobs of the future, what comes next?
Well, I think I just laid out exactly where we're going. We are living in a very challenged global economy. We have enormous economic instability out there. Through it all, the Canadian economy has managed to create a large number of jobs, a better record than anyone in the G7, 1.3 million net new jobs since the end of the global financial crisis, most of them full-time in the private sector, in good wage industries. Incomes have been rising. Now, there are still challenges, and we can do more, but the essence of our plan is making sure that we make investments that we can afford. The other parties are trying to tell us they will deal with the challenges of our economy, of our labor market, of international markets, by raising taxes and running deficits to finance vastly increased amounts of spending. That is not the way to protect our economy in this environment. The way to protect our economy is make specific investments that will help build our labor force, build our infrastructure, build our manufacturing and other resource industries, while at the same time making sure we're keeping our taxes down and our budget balanced.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. That's Mr. Harper's answer. To Mr. Mulcair we go. Jobs. You need to do more, surely, than support just the manufacturing sector. What is your jobs plan?
Well, I listened carefully to your question to the Prime Minister, and I was disappointed that he wasn't able to go beyond resource extraction. Mr. Harper put all of his eggs into one basket, and then he dropped the basket. 400,000 well-paid manufacturing jobs lost on his watch. There are now 300,000 more Canadians without a job than when the recession hit in 2008. So we have a plan to kickstart the economy, to grow manufacturing jobs, work on innovation. We want to drop the taxes of Canada's small and medium-sized businesses because they create 80% of new jobs in this country. And we also want to help people get ahead and make their lives easier, because making sure that you can balance your work life and your family life is important to the NDP. So that's why one of our key planks in this platform is to make sure that we bring in quality, affordable childcare across Canada at most $15 a day. Once it's fully ramped up, that'll be 1 million quality, affordable childcare spaces across the country. That'll be good for the economy, but it'll also be good for women, because it's almost always women who make tough sacrifices in their careers.
Mr. Mulcair. Mr. Trudeau, can you please lead this open part of the debate?
Now, thank you, David. It's great to be here in Calgary tonight. I want to start with a few questions, my friends. Are you better off now than you were 10 years ago when Stephen Harper became Prime Minister? Is our country better off? Do you have better job prospects? Do you have confidence that your kids have a brighter future? I've spent a long time talking with thousands of Canadians across this country. And Mr. Harper may not see what's going on from 24 Sussex Drive, but I do. I know that Canadians are worried about their jobs, and that's what this election is about. Their jobs and the jobs that their kids are going to have.
But Mr. Trudeau...
That's why we have a plan, a strong and clear plan, to invest in the middle class, to grow the economy, give it a kickstart it needs, and put more money in Canadians' pockets. That starts with actually raising taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we can lower them for the middle class. It starts with investing in Canada once again, in roads, in clean water, in transit, in jobs. And when we talk about that investment, we're very clear. We're going to run 3 modest deficits in order to pay for it. Now, those are the kinds of investments that Mr. Harper hasn't made for 10 years. And if you think this economy is doing great, then Mr. Harper is your guy. But if you need a change, the Liberal Party has a plan.
Well, look, I've never said things are great. What I've said is we're living in a very unstable global economic environment. The questions I would ask people at home are the following. In the last 10 years, where would you rather have been in all this global economic instability? Where would you rather have been than Canada? Looking forward, where would you rather be than Canada? I think these are the key questions. Mr. Trudeau proposes permanent deficits. He's opposed, for example, to our cuts to small business, small business taxes. And the reason Mr. Trudeau said he was opposed to small business cuts is he said a large percentage of small businesses are just wealthy people avoiding taxes. Mr. Trudeau, small business is the backbone of the middle class, and it's the backbone of the Canadian economy.
Mr. Harper,
that's why among our investments,
full well, Mr. Harper, you know full well that the Liberal, Mr. Harper knows full well that the Liberal Party plan is to drop small business taxes from 11 to 9%. He's just playing politics. We have a plan not only to encourage small businesses, but to invest in what small businesses need, like reliable transportation, like a growing economy. Mr. Harper has not only the worst growth record on jobs, the worst job creation record since World War II. He has the worst record on economic growth since the Great Depression.
Okay.
We need to grow this economy.
Mr. Mulcair, you're hearing a good ding-dong between these two. Where are you?
Well, I'm going to try to ring their bell. While Mr. Harper thinks that everything is just fine the way it is, Mr. Trudeau is proposing to dump tens of billions of dollars in new debt on the backs of future generations. Prime Minister wants to hit the snooze button while Mr. Trudeau is hitting the panic button. Canadians deserve to know what they're voting on in this election. The NDP has put its numbers out there. We put out a costed plan yesterday. It's frankly reliable and it's sustainable. We've put out numbers and neither of these will do the same. At least we should respect the voting public and let them have an informed decision in this election.
Mr. Harper, you grimaced with that.
Well, look, both of these parties talk about cutting taxes for small business, doing this small business tax cut that we are already moving forward with for the next 4 years. But what they also propose, and small businesses know this around the country, they propose hikes to payroll taxes, to CPP particularly, and also employment insurance, that are 10 times bigger than the tax cuts they are promising small business. That's why the Canadian Federation of Independent Business has come out against these plans. That's why Canadian Federation of Independent Business and other experts today said that Mr. Mulcair's tax increases will cost at least 250,000 jobs. You don't protect our economy and you don't move it forward and create jobs by running
Mr. Harper has demonstrated once again that he's missing the point. Canadians need support. The fact that he's talking about pensions as taxes, why pensions aren't taxes, Mr. Harper, is when people retire, they get their pension money back. They don't get taxes back. That's where the difference is. And Mr. Mulcair needs to hit. Mr. Mulcair needs to hit the wake-up call. Mr. Mulcair has missed the opportunity to invest in Canadians the way we need to.
Let's have Mr. Harper quickly respond in a sentence, then we'll come to Mr. Mulcair.
Look, we have given all kinds of tax incentives for people to save, and they're taking advantage of them. 11 million people have tax-free savings accounts. Workers and employers, small employers, do not want these tax hikes. And when you say they're not tax hikes, they're coming right out of the paychecks. $1,000 for the Liberal Party proposal out of someone making $60,000 a year. Comes out of the mortgage, comes out of planning for education, comes out of putting food on the table.
Let's go to Mr. Mulcair for the final word on this. Mr. Mulcair.
That was a really long sentence, David. Look, the average Canadian knows that a pension plan is necessary. The Canada Pension Plan, as far as Mr. Harper is concerned, is a tax. We view it as an investment in the future. I'm tired of watching successive Liberal and Conservative governments dump these massive ecological, economic and social debts on the backs of future generations.
Thank you very much. And that brings us, with some relief, to the end of the first question. We move now to the second topic, energy and the environment. And this question goes to Mr. Mulcair. Mr. Mulcair, in the last campaign, the NDP put a cost of $21 billion on its carbon pricing policy. What is your current proposal, and what would the cost be for carbon emissions?
Well, thank you very much, David. And we know that a dynamic and innovative energy sector is crucial for Canada for the years to come. And we also know that Canada has international obligations that it has to follow through on. The Liberals signed Kyoto with no plan. They admitted they had no plan to respect it. That's why they went on to have one of the worst records in the world for greenhouse gas production. Shamefully, Stephen Harper made Canada the only country in the world to withdraw from the Kyoto Protocol. Now, when I talk about avoiding leaving a massive debt on the backs of future generations, this is exactly what we're talking about. So yes, we've always believed that the best way to ensure a reduction in greenhouse gases is with what's called a cap and trade system. Actually, Canada and the United States had a very successful model of that to reduce SO2 when it was causing acid rain on our forests. It's worked before and it can work again. But above that, everybody has to understand that there are tens of thousands of jobs across the country, and especially here in Alberta, that rely on that sector. And we need to understand that we have to develop our resources responsibly and sustainably, which is exactly what I did when I was the minister.
Mr. Mulcair, I'm going to go back at that. Let's get the costing. What is the costing for your carbon emission proposal? Is it cap and trade similar to Ontario and Quebec? Is it a carbon tax like British Columbia? What would the cost be?
No, I don't think that you can guarantee a reduction with a carbon tax. A carbon tax is about the tax, although there is more and more information available. A cap and trade system can guarantee the reduction. These are basic principles of sustainable development. You have to make sure that you make the polluter pay for the pollution that they're creating. You can't allow people to use the air, the soil, and the water.
Would that not create revenue hemorrhaging in Alberta to tie with Ontario and Quebec?
No, that's not what happened when we brought in the cap and trade system to reduce the SO2 that was causing acid rain. And you could, of course, make sure that you're reinvesting in green energy technologies. Around the world, there will be $5 trillion spent on green energy technologies in the next 15 years. Unfortunately, Canada's not even going to be part of it because we have a government that has taken a rip and ship approach to sending our resources as fast as they can to other places. We've got to take a different approach, add jobs here in Canada.
But is the bill going to be more than $21 billion or less?
Well, of course, as you know, that was something that was proposed last time, and the cap and trade system that we're proposing now has no such bill, and you know that, Mr.
Thank
Walmsley.
you. Let's move now to Mr. Trudeau. For your plan, it looks like a lot of it is left to the provinces. How do you lead the country, perhaps going to the UN climate conference later this year, without a Canadian policy?
Well, we have a Canadian policy, and it's one that recognizes that for 10 years, under Mr. Harper, with no leadership on the environment, provinces have moved forward, and 86% of our economy, our 4 biggest provinces, have actually committed to putting a price on carbon. And they've done it in different ways, which makes Mr. Mulcair's proposal so unrealistic. The idea of imposing a bureaucracy out of Ottawa, a cap and trade system on provinces like British Columbia that have already moved forward with a world-renowned carbon tax that is actually working for them, is actually a completely nonsensical plan. We are committed to working with the provinces to reduce emissions, to encourage them to hit those the targets needed so that we can contribute as a responsible country once again to reducing emissions. We will go to Paris for the climate change conference with all premiers to talk about how we are going to meet that responsibility we collectively share on this planet to prevent a 2-degree increase in global temperatures.
Thank you. I think we're hearing a lot of skating. Let's go to the Conservative leader. Mr. Harper, you start off the open floor portion.
Well, look, David, I would just point out this is the first government in Canadian history that has actually been able to see a reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions, while at the same time seeing the economy grow, and we're very proud of that. We didn't do that through carbon tax schemes, principally because carbon taxes are not about reducing emissions. Carbon taxes are about raising revenue for the government. And in one form or another, that's what the other parties are proposing. We've been moving forward with a regulatory approach, sector by sector, where we actually know the costs and effects of putting in new regulations and reducing emissions before we actually do it. So it's not just left to chance. But I do, David, want to address the other half of the debate, which is the energy sector. You know, it's been a very important driver of the Canadian economy. It's obviously having a significant downturn right now because of the fall of energy prices. And that sector needs a government that is on its side. We want to see this sector grow and develop.
The problem is, Mr. Walmsley, under Stephen Harper's stewardship, we have not built 1 kilometre of pipeline to Tidewater, and it's easy to understand why. He's gutted a whole series of environmental laws. We don't have a credible, thorough environmental assessment process left in this country. The public is not on side. He thought he was helping the energy companies by destroying that legislation. He's actually made their lives tougher. When I was the minister in Quebec, Mr. Walmsley, I lowered greenhouse gas production in our province every year for the 3 years I was the Minister of the Environment. It can be done. We brought in overarching sustainable development legislation, the toughest in North America. We went so far as to change the Charter of Rights to include the right to live in a clean environment. It can be done. Mr. Harper sees the environment and the economy as polar opposites. Everybody in Canada knows you have to work on both at the same time.
Which is why we've done both. Mr. Mulcair, you actually are the only leader in Canadian history to have gone to another country, you and your colleagues, to the United States to argue against Canadian jobs and against Canadian development projects.
It's exactly the opposite, Mr. Harper. It's exactly the opposite, Mr. Hold on, Mr.
Let Mr. Trudeau and let Mr. Trudeau.
He just said something to me, and I'm going to answer him. 40,000 Canadian jobs would be exported to the United States with Keystone XL. That's not our figure. That's the Government of Canada's figure under Mr. Harper's Conservatives. I want to create those 40,000 jobs in Canada. Let's add value to our natural resources here. That's the way to sustainably develop our resources.
That's why trade's a good thing.
Let's go to Mr. Trudeau.
Mr. Mulcair talks about having been Minister of the Environment in Quebec, but I was living in Quebec at that time, and I remember he was proposing bulk water exports to the United States for Quebec, and that's certainly not something we're interested in.
False.
You gave a speech on it. You said it could be like forestry in the. Well, listen. Look at your own record, Mr.
You look
Mulcair.
at the record.
The fact is, Mr. Harper continues. Mr. Harper continues to pretend that there is a choice between environment and economy. He chooses to say that you cannot build a strong economy if you're still protecting the environment, and that has been his failure. And that has been his failure felt right here in Calgary. He talks about being the best friend that Calgary has ever had, that Alberta has ever had, but he hasn't gotten pipelines built. He has made the oil sands an international pariah, and with friends like Stephen Harper, Alberta doesn't need enemies.
Let's bring it back to some costing. What is the costing of your plan? Mr. Mulcair first.
Our plan for sustainable development includes bringing in overarching legislation that will be rigorously enforced and provide action when a company is trying to pollute the environment. Mr. Harper talks a good game on international trade deals. He's done everything in his power to stop the authorities that exist under the North American Free Trade Agreement from even measuring the pollution going into the environment in Canada. That's his track record. We'll enforce overarching sustainable development legislation. We'll apply it fairly and equally to everyone. And Canadians will know that we're going to stop leaving this massive ecological debt on the backs of future generations.
Now, you ask about our costing. Not only will we move forward on pricing carbon with the provinces and ensuring that we're reducing greenhouse gases in a responsible way, the Liberal Party is also committed to investing $20 billion over 10 years in greener infrastructure. That's floodplains mitigation here in Calgary and places across the country. It's investing in clean jobs, in green tech, in making sure that we're moving towards renewable energies. Yes, we need to get our resources to market. It's one of the fundamental responsibilities of a Prime Minister. But in order to do that, we need to move in a responsible way that understands the future that we're leaving to our kids.
Mr. Harper?
Look, we're investing heavily in green energy, about $1 billion a year in green energy and energy efficiency technology. But what we're not doing is imposing costs upon consumers. We're in a fragile global economy. We don't need additional costs. You know, we heard the same old story from the NDP on this. They say, we're going to fix this somehow through raising taxes. In their platform yesterday, they put in a bunch of tax increases for the energy and mining sector.
Completely false.
You know, this is the same story we had in Alberta when the NDP came to office. We'd somehow fix our problems through raising taxes. And now what have we seen? Now I know tradespeople who are now getting higher individual tax bills. We see people getting layoffs because their employers are paying higher taxes.
Mr. Harper's solution to everything has been to drop the taxes
to move the energy sector or the Canadian economy forward to challenge global economy.
He's dropped the taxes.
Mr. Mulcair, please. Mr. Mulcair,
Mr. Harper has dropped the taxes of Canada's largest corporations by tens of billions of dollars. If that was such a good idea to create jobs, how come we lost 400,000 well-paid manufacturing jobs? How come we have 300,000 more unemployed today than when Mr. Harper's first recession hit in 2008?
We now move to the third topic, which is infrastructure. And this goes to Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau, you're committed to taking us into deficit in order to fund your infrastructure plan. Spending money is an easy promise. What does success look like?
Canadians understand that when you want to buy a new home or renovate your existing home because you're adding to the family, you take out a bank loan. You know that you can invest in your future because that's what confident, optimistic countries do. We invest in our future. And right now, Mr. Harper thinks that the investments he's made over the past 10 years are enough. They're not, because he has the worst job creation rate since World War II. He has the worst growth rate of any prime minister since the Great Depression. We need to create the transit that Canadians need, and we need to start doing it right now. Mr. Mulcair talks about putting things off for 3, 5, 10, 20 years. That's not what we need. We're the only party that has said, yes, we will run 3 modest deficits because it's time to invest in Canada once again and give people the support they need. That's why we're going to work with municipalities and provinces to identify the necessary projects and get them built, because we will invest in the future of our country.
Mr. Trudeau, you say that you would create a new infrastructure bank. That is dependent upon Canada's pension funds investing. So far, they haven't chosen to do that because the projects in Canada are too small. What if they don't sign up?
Actually, that's not at all true, David. We were actually proposing a new infrastructure bank that will help provinces and municipalities borrow at the advantageous rate that the federal government actually has. Yes, we are, as a separate initiative, looking to encourage pension funds to invest here in Canada, but in order to do that, we have to have a much more robust partner in the federal government. For a decade now, Mr. Harper has underinvested in our infrastructure, and while he's been running fiscal deficits, has also been increasing our infrastructure deficit. The fact is, Canadians stuck in traffic on the Deerfoot or on the Gardiner or or elsewhere across the country know that we need a plan that's going to tackle transit and roads right now, not a decade from now like Mr. Mulcair, and not at all like Mr. Harper has been doing. That's what our plan is all about. That's why I'm going to invest in the future of our country.
Mr. Harper, is Mr. Trudeau onto something?
Absolutely not. Look, here are the facts. This year, our government is putting more into infrastructure, 15 times more than the last full year of the Liberal government. That is how much we've increased federal infrastructure investments. Over the decade to come, our economic action plan to create jobs and growth has some $80 billion, an unprecedented amount of money that's being put into federal, provincial, and municipal infrastructure across the country. Of course, the easiest thing to do for anybody else is come along and say, let's just spend more. But we've managed to do this without raising your taxes and without borrowing anything as we move forward. Mr. Trudeau comes along and says, let's spend more, let's raise taxes, let's run a deficit. Running a deficit is not the kind of protection our economy needs right now. We're in an unstable global economy. We've managed to return to a balanced budget now for the second year, when many other countries haven't done so. That's an asset we should continue to pursue, and we don't need to spend more just for the sake of being able to say we spend more.
Let's move to the open floor part of this question. Mr. Mulcair, you have the lead.
Thank you, Mr. Walmsley. Mr. Trudeau's plan is frankly reckless and it's uncosted. Municipalities across this country are asked to spend the cost, to assume the cost of 60% of the infrastructure with only 8% of the tax base. Mathematically, that's impossible. It's not sustainable. But what's also not sustainable is the old Liberal approach of leaving tens of billions of dollars in debt on the backs of future generations. We are going to be a reliable, long-term partner for municipalities across the country. We don't need the short-term thinking of the Liberals.
Actually,
we need money invested long-term. Our plan is for constant spending over 20 years, $1.5 billion a year in infrastructure, $1.3 billion a year in transit. Those are important sums of money, reliable, long-term.
Mr. Mulcair likes to talk about long-term, but what he doesn't realize is long-term actually starts right now. Not 5 years from now, not 20 years from now, not after a few mandates of Mr. Mulcair in government. Canadians need help right now. And the fact of the matter is that we have a situation right now where interest rates are low, so borrowing has never been cheaper for the federal government. Our debt to GDP ratio is low and getting lower. Our economy has been flat for 10 years. So my question is, now that there are thousands upon thousands of skilled Canadians looking for work in construction and in growth, if this isn't the time to invest, what would be? Because the fact of the matter is, I talked with Mr. Mayor Nenshi just yesterday, and he was saying that costs for municipal investments are actually down 20% this year because, compared to last year because of the circumstance we're in. This is the time to invest in the future of our country. Canadians know this. The only people who don't seem to know this are those two gentlemen on the stage.
Mr. Harper?
Look, not only are we pursuing a long-term, large-scale infrastructure plan under our economic action plan, this year We're proceeding with a $6 billion plan to eliminate the federal infrastructure and deficit entirely going forward. That's what we're doing right now. And we're doing that without borrowing money, without raising taxes. Mr. Trudeau says he will raise taxes. Mr. Mulcair's plan is the same old NDP playbook. We saw it in British Columbia, we saw it in Ontario, we're seeing it in Alberta. A whole bunch more spending, and we can finance that just by raising taxes on a few big corporations and a few rich people. What happens? You start putting people out of work, slowing the economy, killing jobs. That's the reality of the NDP plan wherever it has been tried. And when we are in
Actually, Mr. Harper, you're wrong about that. You're wrong about that, Mr. Harper. Mr. Mulcair is not going to raise taxes on the wealthiest Canadians. He's chosen to not raise taxes on the wealthiest Canadians. Only the Liberal Party will to give a tax cut to the middle class.
Let's go to Mr. Mulcair.
Thank you, Mr. Walmsley. The NDP is categorical. We will not be raising taxes on individual Canadians. We are going to be asking Canadian large corporations to start paying their fair share. They're the only Canadians who don't right now. Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Harper are of one mind. They thought that dropping their taxes by tens of billions of dollars, way below that of our close trading partners, was a good idea. It hasn't been. But when we do raise it, it'll be reasonably, and it'll still be way below what it was under the Liberals, and it'll even be below the average of what it's been under the Conservatives. We're also going to make sure that we close some tax loopholes, like the stock option tax loophole brought in by the Liberals, which actually will ensure that people are effectively paying more, not a theoretical amount where they have all these loopholes that they can fall back on. With regard to the difference between the Liberals and us, it's true, the Liberals want to raise individuals' personal income taxes. The NDP won't do that. I don't think it's fair that someone looking at their pay stub is going to see that 58.75% is already gone in income tax. That will be the result of Mr. Trudeau's plan. It's not our plan.
Mr. Mulcair talks about corporations as being the only people in this country who are not paying their fair share. So he thinks the wealthiest 1% are paying their fair share. But if you look at the past 30 years, incomes for the wealthiest 1% of Canadians have increased by 70%, while their federal tax share has decreased by 32%. Now, I don't think that's fair. We're the only party that is asking that wealthiest 1% who has done well over the past years to pay a little more so we can cut those taxes for the middle class.
The question is on infrastructure. Is the creation of another bank the answer?
It's an infrastructure bank that loans to municipalities and provinces so they can take advantage of the preferential rates that the federal government gets. It's a way of, yet another way, on top of the $60 billion of investments we're making in our municipalities. It starts with doubling in the very first year for transit, for child care spaces, and for seniors' residences. It is time to invest in the future of our country. It has never been more appropriate to invest in the future of our country. These two gentlemen can't see that because they're stuck in a political way, not an economic way.
But Mr. Mulcair just claimed he's going to raise hundreds of millions of dollars through closing treatment of stock options. There is simply not that kind of money in that, and this is the approach of the NDP, to exaggerate how much money they can raise through a few tax hikes. The reality is, when he says he's not going to raise money on people, the payroll tax hikes of the NDP for CPP and EI amount to over $1,500 a person who's making just $60,000 a year. Those funds come right out of your paycheck. They come right out of the money you're using to pay your mortgage, buy your clothes, fund your kids' education. Those are real costs.
Mr. Mulcair,
they just don't go away because you say fund something down the road.
The stock option tax loophole costs Canadian taxpayers $500 million a year, and it goes mostly to the wealthiest Canadians. We'll get rid of it.
We have to leave it there, and we now move to question 4. This is on immigration, and it goes to Mr. Harper. All parties agree that immigration is central to Canada's long-term economic strategy. What is the right balance between economic migrants and those seeking family reunification?
Well, look, every year we put out numbers, and I think we've maintained a balance between those various categories. We have, I think, about 2/3 of the people who come in are related to economic streams. Others are related to family reunification, refugees, other sorts of streams. But what I'm most proud of, David, is this is the first government in Canadian history that, faced with a recession, did not cut our immigration. And the reason we didn't cut our immigration is because we understand that, given the demographic and economic pressures in front of us, that a long-term, large-scale immigration program is in this country's interest. That's why we're looking at the long term. And I'm very pleased we've done that and moved forward on that. We're doing specific things to make sure, particularly the economic sections of our immigration policy, are more oriented to actually getting results. For example, we used to process applications in order. We now have what's called express entry, where we're targeting those applications that fill actual vacancies in the job market. And this is a transformation I think will be very important to making the policy even more effective.
Should we increase immigration numbers to counter the aging demographic of Canada?
Well, we've maintained our numbers at very high levels. They're over 250,000 a year. I think there is room going forward to increase that, but obviously we want to make sure we get the right mix, because there are significant settlement funding costs that come along with some streams of immigration. So look, I think that's a possibility going forward, but I think the main thing is that we make sure that we're maximizing the economic benefit of immigration. I talked about express entry. I'll give you another example of something we're doing, and that's the Foreign Credentials Loans Program that we brought in as a pilot. We're now expanding, where we have found that if we give, through third-party groups, immigrants very small loans to upgrade their qualifications so they're recognized in Canada, we can get them into the workforce much more quickly, and we have a payback rate on those loans of well over 90%. So I think there's lots of things we can do, even within our existing very large levels, to improve the system, but I do think we could look at expanding it going forward.
Thank you very much. Mr. Trudeau, what role does immigration play in your economic plan?
I think Canada has long known that immigration is essential to our growth. We have a country that has benefited from people coming here from faraway lands, building a better future for themselves and their children and their communities here than they could have anywhere else. And that's been the strength of this country, the fact that we are a country strong, not in spite of our differences, but because of them. And one of the things that Mr. Harper has continued to underinvest in and not create enough of is family reunification. You talked about it early on, David. This is something that is really important to create strong communities, because yes, the economic benefits of immigrants are well known, but there is more to them than just workers. They are community builders. They are creating stronger cities and stronger future for future generations. That's where the cuts he's made to integration programs and to helping Canadians actually succeed are so disappointing, because Canada has always given people a path to succeed here in this country, and that's what we need to get back to once again.
Open floor, Mr. Mulcair.
Canada is a country of immigrants. Unless you're First Nations, Inuit, or Métis, your family immigrated to Canada, and it's what built this great country, David. And I couldn't be prouder than to tell you that my wife, Catherine, immigrated to Canada, and she's one of the many people who's just contributed so much, and I think we can be so proud of that tradition. Now, under Mr. Harper's Conservatives, we've been closing the door more and more on certain aspects of immigration. Mr. Trudeau just referenced it, and he's right. Family reunification is essential. It's always been part of our immigration system. It's been completely shut down under Mr. Harper's Conservatives. I personally believe that the best social program is a united family, and you've got that strong family base there allowing people to come in. Shouldn't be considered, as the Conservatives always call it, just a burden for society. I think it's something that contributes a great deal. On temporary foreign workers, we know that they've left that program a shambles. It was created to help in areas like agriculture, but it's went off in all different directions. Even Mr. Harper, in a secret meeting with some media in Vancouver, admitted that it was a total shambles. And there's one final point. Mr. Harper referenced recognition of foreign diplomas and credentials. Well, unfortunately, it's still the #1 cause of unemployment amongst immigrants, failure to recognize diplomas and credentials. I used to be chair of the Quebec Professions Board. I've got a lot of experience on this. I know we can be doing a lot more to help
Mr.
that.
Harper?
Well, I'm not sure how you have a secret meeting with the media, but...
We wish.
But
you'd manage it, Mr. Harper. I know you'd manage it.
Let me just correct the facts. Under the first 10 years of this government, we've seen family class and family reunifications rise by 25%. When it was under the previous Liberal government, it went down by nearly 50% in their first few years of office as they cut back immigration levels. So we haven't done that. And I think people understand that the New Canadians particularly, the Liberal Party talked a good game, but didn't deliver. We have 2.5 million newcomers in this country who are overwhelmingly contributing positively to this country. They're entrepreneurs, they're family people, they're growing our economy, working hard. And this is one of the most positive things about this country, that we are able, through controlled and legal immigration, to have the best record on integration and success in immigration anywhere in the world. It's something I think we all should be very proud of.
Mr. Harper has demonstrated over the past weeks that in the case of refugees, Canada is not doing enough. And this is something that Mr. Harper has unfortunately done a number of times. I mean, he likes to talk about standing up against tyrants and dictators and against terrorists, but you know who stand up against dictators and terrorists? Families fighting to keep their family together, hoping for a better life for them. And they cross the oceans and they make it to Canada. And what does Mr. Harper do? He takes away their health care. The fact is, we need to once again be a country that is open and welcoming. Yes, we need to be concerned about security, but we don't take that as the excuse to close our doors. In years past, whether it was Joe Clark, a Conservative Prime Minister who brought in tens of thousands of Vietnamese boat people, whether it was other governments who welcomed in people, who built, who contributed to this country, we need to once again be the open, generous country, not naive, making sure we're doing security right, but not using it as an excuse to do less than we should, than the vast majority of Canadians, including mayors and premiers, feel we should.
Mr. Harper, let's try and bring it back to the economy.
Yeah, well, let me just correct the record on a couple of things.
Refugees are about the economy, David.
Trudeau said about refugees. First of all, the fact of the matter is, we have not taken away health care from immigrants and refugees. On the contrary, the only time we've removed it is where we have clearly bogus refugee claimants who have been refused and turned down. We do not offer them a better health care plan than the ordinary Canadian can receive. I think that's something that most new and existing and old stock Canadians agree with. On the issue of refugees, this remains one of the largest countries in the world in terms of refugee resettlement, including from Syria and Iraq.
That's not true, Mr. Harper.
I have said we will bring in more, but what I have said we will not do. You know, these guys would have had in the last 2 weeks us throwing open our borders and literally hundreds of thousands of people coming without any kind of security check or documentation.
And that's
some other
not
countries
true,
have
Mr.
done.
Harper.
That would have been an enormous mistake. See, we're following a balanced approach where we bring in more refugees.
Fears all the time.
We're providing
fears
more
of
humanitarian
others,
support.
Fears of different communities. We have a Prime Minister who prefers to pander to fears.
Let's go to Mr. Mulcair.
That's not right, sir.
Immigration and the economy.
Canadians want a Prime Minister who understands the sense of urgency that we all feel when we see the current crisis in Syria. Mr. Harper, unfortunately, and it's undignified, is fear-mongering. It's completely false to affirm that any of the parties in Canada would want to throw open the doors to people without any regard to security. But Rick Hillier, who is no less an authority than former Chief of Defence Staff last week, said, we've got to stop using the security concerns as an excuse to do nothing. So, Mr. Harper, why don't you stop using the security excuse as a pretext to do nothing? Because
Mulcair,
nobody wants to let somebody in without a security check, but you're doing nothing.
Harper?
We're announcing that we're bringing in more refugees. We're announcing we're bringing them in more quickly. We're providing a matching fund for humanitarian support because even under the most generous refugee policy, the vast majority of these millions of people will remain in those countries and will need our assistance. Those are the things we're doing.
The UN has asked us to bring in 9,000 refugees before Christmas, and you won't do it. They've asked for 46,000 over the next 4 years. You won't do it. That's the United Nations asking that, Mr. Harper.
But it is not the kind of reckless approach that these two parties
are fear-mongering on the backs of people who need help, the most suffering in the world.
Canada has done more in the past. We need to do more right now. We will do more on October 20th.
Move to the next topic, and the next topic is housing. Mr. Trudeau, Canadians have been on a borrowing binge to buy ever more expensive homes. What would you do to guard against a housing bubble?
Well, the fact is, for many Canadians, their entire economic security is in their home. It's their savings, it's their retirement. And we need to make sure that while housing prices rise, incomes are rising as well. The middle-class Canadians believe that their jobs are giving them better and better salaries, that they can get raises. In order to do that, we need to create economic growth. We need to reassure Canadians that the economy is going to grow at the same pace as their house values. And that's not what Mr. Harper has delivered. He has the worst record on growth since R.B. Bennett in the depths of the Great Depression. But there are many other Canadians who are facing challenges around housing because they can't find rental housing. And that's why the Liberal Party has a plan to increase investment in home construction of rental units, to help seniors with the cost of their rents by increasing GIS, and by making sure that we actually give people the support needed to be able to get their homes and have that economic security.
Would you restrict foreign ownership of residential homes in Canada?
I think one of the things that we're seeing in a number of places around the country is concerns on that, but the fact is we don't actually have enough accurate data to understand entirely what's happening. And one of the reasons for that is Mr. Harper has chosen to cut the long-form census, and it leaves us with less understanding of the very real needs. The Liberal Party is committed to restoring the long-form census to ensure that we have the kind of data so that we can respond to local challenges like you speak of. What we need to be as a federal government is a much better partner to provinces and municipalities to be able to address challenges that are being faced in our major centres like Vancouver or Toronto, but also the challenges that are being felt right across the country for people who are struggling to buy their first homes, people who are struggling to find rental housing, and who need help to get that economic ladder to success that has always been there for Canadians but hasn't been over the past 10 years. That's what the Liberal plan to invest in the future of our country is all about.
Mr. Mulcair, what would you do to help the squeezed middle class who have high mortgages and high property taxes?
Well, thank you, David. And the first thing I think that Canadians should recall is that the last time the Liberals were in power, they cancelled Canada's national housing strategy. It's also worth knowing that there were 35,000 homeless in Canada right now. So what we would do, gave an example earlier of our quality, affordable childcare at maximum $15 a day. You know, here in Calgary and Toronto and lots of other cities, parents are paying well over $20,000 a year for childcare for an infant. It's simply unaffordable. And young people today have the largest student debt that there ever was. As I went across the country, I met lots of young people who are thinking of having a family, but they look at the cost of that conciliation, balancing their life and their family and their work. It's extremely difficult. So we would make sure we would put more money in their pockets with quality, affordable childcare. And we would bring in, as a model for others, and with regard to the 100,000 people that it would give a raise to, a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour.
Open floor, Mr. Harper.
Well, first of all, let me just say, well, no doubt there are some people who are overextended. I think the housing story is a very positive story in this country. You know, you look around the world where there have been all of these financial and other crashes, a lot of them centered around the housing market. In Canada, we have seen home ownership rise to record levels. We now have higher home ownership than the United States because people have been able to take advantage of lower interest rates when their job prospects have been solid and good and their incomes have been growing. That's a positive Canadian story that we should celebrate. How do we, in this unstable global economy, continue to protect that going forward? We believe we bring in specific incentives to help homeowners. For instance, the home renovation tax credit we're bringing forward, the improvements to the home buyers plan, the doubling of contributions to tax-free savings accounts, things that allow people to save and invest more in their homes. What we do not need when our economy is threatened by developments in the global economy is tax increases on ordinary Canadian families through payroll taxes or permanent deficits. These are risks we cannot afford, and they're not good for our homeowners.
Mr. Harper talks about growth, but he hasn't been able to get it done for 10 years. He has the worst growth record in 80 years of any prime minister. So we know how to grow the economy. We invest in the economy once again. Interest rates are low, our debt to GDP is low, and economic growth has been flat. We need to kickstart our economy, and that's exactly what we're going to do so people can get better jobs and actually afford their homes. That's where we help. And Mr. Mulcair, who's talking about childcare, the fact is that a young family with a 2-year-old doesn't need childcare 8 years from now when their kid is in grade 5. They need it right away. But Mr. Mulcair is not making a choice that's going to allow to invest in his promises. They're puffs of smoke. We need to invest right now. We know right now to invest in the future of this country.
Okay,
Mr. Mulcair, you can make jokes all you like. This is Canadians having trouble making ends meet, and you're offering a national minimum wage that will not touch 99% of
Mr. Trudeau, thank you.
You're giving false hope.
Here's what we're offering, Mr. Trudeau. You had 13 years the last time you were in power to get to childcare. It was in 4 successive Liberal red books. And you know how many spaces they created? 0.
That's not
the
true,
least
Mr.
we can
Mulcair.
say is that it wasn't a priority for them. Quality, affordable childcare is a top
8 years
priority
from now,
for
Mr.
the NDP.
Mulcair. 8 years from now,
starts
if
in
the
Mr.
provinces
Harper's
kick in billions
year,
of dollars,
and
if
then
the
every
provinces
after
kick
that
in.
will go up.
Can I ask you, what message do you give to millennials today who are trying to get onto the property rung? What do you say to those with student?
Well, I say that we've got a prime minister who just said that he thinks it's a good idea that a bungalow in a lot of our suburbs in places like Vancouver and Toronto is totally out of reach for them. Look at the cost of housing in some of our major cities. It is out of control. And at the same time, Mr. Harper says, it's okay, I've got a renovation tax credit. How do you renovate a house you can't afford to buy in the first place? We're going to start by putting more money in people's pockets. Affordable, quality childcare is one of them. We'll give a raise to over 100,000 people earning the federal minimum wage or less. They'll get more money. A $15 an hour federal minimum wage is not only good for them, it's a good signal to the provinces to do the same thing, to bring up a living wage. You know why? Because I think that somebody who works full-time shouldn't be living in poverty. I'll leave
Mr. Mulcair, I have spoken to an awful lot of Canadians earning the minimum wage. They work in coffee shops, they work in grocery checkout lines, and you're giving them false hope by talking about a $15
I think that they're smarter than you're giving them credit for, Mr. Trudeau, because
you
when
are
we
promising them a national
we
minimum
had people
wage.
who were working in banks, in airports, in interprovincial transport, and in ports. They're earning less than $15 an hour, and over 100,000 of them are going to get a raise.
99%
of be a signal to some of the provinces to bring in a $15 an hour federal minimum wage.
Thank you to
aren't
both.
going to be
Let's go to
affected
Mr.
by
Harper.
Mr. Harper's
One second.
Mr. Harper. We'll come back.
Mr. Trudeau voted for this on September 22nd. Now he's campaigning against it.
I
think Canadians have a right to know
that. The false promises you are making. You pretend this national minimum wage is a significant thing. It's not going to help.
Anyone out there didn't realize
it's not going to help 99% of people
this
earning
is the election that's showing it. Let's go to Mr. Harper.
Yeah, just to repeat, we're not just bringing in a home renovation tax credit, we're also enhancing the home buyers plan to help families reach their and be able to build their first home, just as we've enhanced the first-time home buyers plan. So we've done a lot of things to encourage home ownership. In terms of rising costs due to a possibility of foreign speculation, we've said we're prepared to act on that if the data show that that is really a problem.
Look,
we're doing more than these things to help Canadian families. Mr. Mulcair talks about childcare. We've delivered directly to Canadian families the universal childcare benefit. Now we are enhancing it. We're increasing deductions through income tax for your child care expenses.
Yeah, but that's not what you
we're
promised.
doubling the tax-free
Mr. Harper, you promised 125,000 child care spaces, and you delivered the same amount as the Liberals, precisely
without
zero.
raising your taxes, without bringing
why did you promise child care spaces?
Mr. Harper,
Mr. Trudeau,
Mr. Harper and Mr. Mulcair agree on one thing. They want to continue to send Mr. Harper's UCCB checks to millionaires just because they have children. We don't think that's fair. We're going to stop sending those checks to the people who don't need it so we can send larger checks to the families who do need it and lift 315,000 kids out of poverty. That will make a significant difference in the lives of people who need it, and neither Mr. Harper
Trudeau,
nor Mr.
even
Mulcair will actually do that.
We have to move on.
You don't have enough money in your budget to fund your promises.
We move to the
That's why you
final
have
topic of the first half of this debate, taxation. Mr. Mulcair, we address this to you first. You say you will raise corporate tax rate from the current 15% to 17%. What economic rather than political reason justifies your decision?
Well, Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Harper have had a single-minded approach. The Liberals and the Conservatives have agreed that tens of billions of dollars of tax reductions to Canada's largest and most profitable corporations was the way to go. But as we've seen, David, that hasn't worked out so well. We've lost 400,000 well-paid manufacturing jobs on Mr. Harper's watch. There are 300,000 more people unemployed today than when his first recession hit. So yes, the NDP is quite clear that Canada's large corporations are going to go back to paying something resembling their fair share. It'll still be less than the average that it was under Mr. Harper's Conservatives, and it'll be well below what it was under the Liberals. But we're asking all Canadians to pay their fair share, and that would include the largest corporations. But at the same time, we're going to start right away. We're not going to wait like Mr. Harper would. We're going to start right away to reduce the taxes on Canada's job creators. Our small and medium-sized businesses create 80% of new jobs in this country, and that, we think, is a good idea. We're also going to close stock loopholes, because those are the types of loopholes that exist for the rich. We'll make sure that they effectively pay more. That's the right approach.
But if corporations move their money elsewhere, you lose both your balanced budget and your revenue.
That's why you've also got to work at the same time against tax havens. Mr. Harper's done nothing about that. We've had cases where other authorities in other countries have given full lists of Canadians who had been using illegal tax havens, and Mr. Harper's done nothing about that. At the same time, the NDP will take an approach to make sure that the wealthiest start paying their fair share. When we made that announcement at the Broadband Institute, we looked at the successive years of promises by the Liberals talking about millennial goals to help raise children out of poverty. I don't accept as inevitable that in a country as wealthy as Canada, hundreds of thousands of children go to school every morning without having eaten. So we're going to take that money, the $500 million that the stock option tax loophole gives to Canada's wealthiest. We're going to dedicate it dollar for dollar to help lift those children and their families out of poverty. That's direct action to act on a problem that the other parties have talked about for years but have done nothing about. Yes, Canada's largest corporations are going to start paying something resembling their fair share, David, and it's high time that they did. Their approach has failed, and it doesn't work, and we will change it.
Mr. Harper, you won't raise taxes. How do you raise the federal revenues?
Well, actually, as you know, we've cut business taxes, and our corporate tax revenues are actually rising because we have a competitive tax environment that attracts investment. You know, I go back once again to what Mr. Mulcair is saying. He's claiming he's going to cut taxes on small business. Then why is the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and other experts saying that his plan will cause job losses? Because in fact, he raises taxes. And we've seen this NDP playbook everywhere. They claim they're going to balance the budget, bring in billions in new spending, balance the budget through tax increases. And what happens? We end up with job losses. That's what we had with the NDP in power in Ontario. That's what we had with the NDP in power in British Columbia. And we're seeing exactly the same story here in Alberta. We had a round of layoffs because of low oil prices. Now we're having a round of layoffs because of the business tax increases of the NDP. In an unstable global economy, we have competitive tax rates. They're not super low, but they are competitive. This is something we need to protect our economy, keep creating jobs. High taxes, permanent deficits do not create jobs.
Open floor round. Mr. Trudeau, take the lead.
Well, Mr. Harper is just talking about the round of layoffs here in Alberta, and that's exactly why we have a plan to invest in creating transit, in creating the kinds of support to invest now when there's an opportunity and thousands of people are out of work with skills that can be put to work in building our country right now and in the years to come. But on taxes, we've been very clear. We feel that overall Canadians pay enough in taxes, except the middle class should pay less taxes and the wealthiest Canadians should pay more. So I will do what my two opponents will not. I'm going to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we can cut them for the middle class. Now, Mr. Mulcair likes to talk about fair share, but what he's going to do will do nothing to tax the bank executives who get paid high salaries because cutting corporate taxes will just prevent the banks or the executives to hire more people in their economy. We're actually going to lose jobs with Mr. Mulcair's approach on taxes.
Let's go to Mr. Mulcair.
Mr. Trudeau's very first vote in Parliament 7 years ago was to back Mr. Harper's corporate tax giveaways. And one of his most recent and one of his last votes in Parliament was to vote for Bill C-51, which seriously compromises the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. We stood up against C-51 even when it was highly popular. We showed why it was dangerous. That's leadership.
That's
Mulcair,
what we're going to talking about Canadians getting ahead right now, and you're playing the same kinds of politics of division and fear that Mr. Harper has. Mr. Harper wants to talk about terrorists hiding behind every leaf and rock.
Talking about
Mr. Mulcair wants to pretend that suddenly we've ripped up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or in a police state. Both of those are politics of fear that the Liberal Party has refused to accept because we need to both protect Canadian security and defend our rights and freedoms, and the Liberal Party has always done both. But on taxes, we have a plan to actually lift 315,000 kids out of poverty by increasing child benefit payments to families who need it. And we're going to ask the wealthiest to pay a little bit more so we can lower taxes for the middle class. This is something that neither Mr. Mulcair nor Mr. Harper will actually do. And it's not about politics for us. It's about doing the right thing, recognizing that for the 10 years of Mr. Harper, there hasn't been the kind of growth that Canadians need, and Canadians with money in their pockets to spend are actually going to create opportunities for themselves, for their families, for their communities.
Doing the right thing, Mr. Harper?
Absolutely not. Let me just be clear on what we've actually done. We have reduced, in the case of small business, The federal tax burden on small business is down by over 40% under this government. It's going to go down further. You know, we brought in things like tax-free savings accounts that 11 million Canadians are benefiting from. Income splitting for our pensioners and our families. Over 6 million adults benefit from that. We're bringing in a home renovation tax credit that millions of people will want to use, will be able to use. We're enhancing registered education savings plans, registered disability savings. We brought in the cuts to the GST, the broadest tax cut you could possibly bring in, 2 points that benefited virtually every single Canadian. This is why the New York Times, no conservative paper, ran an article that said it compared the Canadian middle class to other middle classes where our disposable income has actually been moving ahead when everyone else has been falling behind. Partly because we're making sure we have more money in people's pockets. And we are the only party not talking about raising any of your taxes going forward or running deficits going forward. And this is, in an unstable global world, the kind of plan that we need, not one that comes up, gives you a small business tax cut, and then comes in and hammers your employer and hammers you as a worker with an enormous payroll tax increase.
Actually, Mr. Harper is talking about disposable income. We just saw that disposable income for families has hit almost 165%. Canadians are more indebted now than they've ever been. That's why we need a government to actually step up and create opportunities for Canadians by investing in better transit, by investing in social housing and childcare spaces, by investing in the support for floodplains mitigation like we need here in Calgary, investing in green infrastructure that's going to create the kinds of jobs going forward that we know we need. We have a plan to invest in the future of this country, and we're being absolutely straight about it. Yes, we are going to run modest deficits for the next 3 years because borrowing has never been cheaper because of low interest rates, because our debt to GDP ratio is healthy and going lower, and because the economy is flat and Canadians need jobs. We have a plan to kickstart the economy, to make it easier for the middle class to get ahead, to make it easier for people who want to join the middle class to succeed. That's what we are actually putting forward, and right now, neither Mr. Harper nor Mr. Mulcair has a plan to do that. Mr. Harper thinks it's all fine. Mr. Mulcair says he puts it off.
Thank you very much, David. Mr. Trudeau recently said that a large percentage of small business owners were tax cheats. Frankly, I find that offensive. That doesn't correspond to the small business owners that I met across this country who, it should be reminded to all of us, create more than 80% of the new jobs in our country. They deserve a tax break. That will help create new jobs. That's the way of the future. That's the NDP's
But you're
plan.
collecting $500 million
from experience about the shell company you set up for your speaking fees. That's not the experience I've seen with the mom and pop operations across Canada.
Your experience is to play politics with everything, Mr. Mulcair.
Thank you to the three leaders. Now, while the leaders catch their breath, we'll move to the second part of the evening. And this part has a different pace to it. It is said that in the old days, the electorate used to choose their representatives. But now, as data becomes more sophisticated, politicians are able to choose as well as ignore key demographics. It affects everything from policy to selection to who the politicians choose to talk to. It marks a profound and some would say uncomfortable shift. Wish me luck as I try to push the leaders off their well-rehearsed speaking notes and give each of them the opportunity to explain themselves more thoroughly and hopefully with fewer interruptions from the others. I will ask each leader a specific question that will be followed by an exchange between myself and that leader before turning it to open debate. Again, the leaders have no prior knowledge of these questions. And we'll start with Mr. Mulcair. Mr. Mulcair, you lead a party that has never run the country. Why should the electorate hand the national economy to you?
Well, thank you, David. And that is a key question in this campaign because after 150 years of being told that we have no choice, that when we're tired of the Liberal sponsorship scandal, we have to alternate back to the Conservatives. And when we get tired of the Conservative Senate scandal, then hold on. For the first time in our history, there is another choice. The party that, according to Canada's own finance department, has the best record for balanced budgets. Tommy Douglas took over the province of Saskatchewan that was in bankruptcy after Liberal rule, ran 17 consecutive balanced budgets, and brought in Medicare. I come from a family of 10 kids. I'm the second oldest. We had to work hard. We lived within our means. We took care of each other. Those are the values that have guided me as a father, as a grandfather, and as a husband. I'm very proud of that, and those are the values that will guide me in the future. We are a party that will make people our top priority. We brought in Medicare with Tommy Douglas. We'll bring in affordable quality childcare across Canada.
Your biography is entitled Strength of Conviction. But is your determination to avoid a federal deficit at all costs not simply opportunism and a defensive play?
It's something that reflects exactly how I've been as a public administrator. I've been in public life for over 35 years. I practiced law as a lawyer for 10 years during that period, but I've always served the public. My wife, Catherine, is a psychologist who works in long-term care and palliative care. Our older son is a police officer for 17 years in the Quebec Provincial Police. Our youngest son is a college professor. We all serve the public. I think that there's no more noble calling. So I want to make sure that we do the right thing for people going forward. I want to make sure that when my granddaughter goes to university, she doesn't have to borrow at the level that young people are borrowing today. I want to make this a better society, and I don't want to do like Mr. Trudeau, leave a massive debt on the backs of future generations.
But this determination for a balanced budget, no deficit, is surely something that is a challenge to the NDP's fabric.
Our fabric understands, as I just mentioned with the example of Tommy Douglas, but you can look at the Roy Romanos of this world, it's in our DNA. We know that the only way to bring in something as important as quality, affordable childcare across Canada is to build it on a solid foundation, and for us that means balanced budgets. Doesn't mean that there won't be times when you have to spend. In 2008, we were in the worst recession since the 1930s. Of course, everyone agreed that we have to spend at that time, but that's not the case now. We don't want to leave more billions on the backs of future generations. We're already leaving them a massive ecological and social debt. They don't need that economic debt as well.
Okay, I want to follow up, and this is a recurring issue as we enter the last part of the debate. And that is what all of your visions are for this great country. What, Mr. Mulcair, will you do to build a new economy?
Well, one of the things that we will do is make sure that it's a knowledge-based economy, because we know that that's the way of the future. The only way to create new wealth is to create new knowledge. And Canada has to be playing a more active role. But when I traveled across the country on what we were calling a kitchen table tour, I was in Sault Ste. Marie, the young couple that I met, I was in their home. They told me that between them they had $130,000 in student debt. With a $24,000 a year childcare fee and houses where they are, when's that young couple supposed to start thinking of starting a family? That's the reality today, and believe it or not, having children is a good thing for that couple, but it's also a good thing for the economy. So let's get this right for the future. Let's make sure that we get our priorities right. My priority is always going to be doing like we did when we brought in Medicare. That helped my family, but it's helped Canadian families for generations now, and that's why we want to make sure that our social programs are on a solid footing, and that includes balanced budgets.
Okay, let's go to the open floor part of this, and Mr. Trudeau. Sorry. Yes, Mr.
Mr. Mulcair keeps talking about investing in our future. He keeps talking about doing the right things for families who need help, except you can't put forward a plan for investment like my plan on Stephen Harper's budget. It takes the optimism that we need to invest once again in our future, to know that Canadians are capable of building a stronger future. And after the low growth that we've had for many years, it's time to kickstart the economy. That's why what I'm worried about saddling my kids with is a lack of jobs, a lack of good infrastructure, a lack of a future, because a government didn't want to invest in our country. Now, this is what our plan is all about, building a stronger future. Mr. Mulcair is putting it off. He's made balancing Stephen Harper's budget his priority, which means he can't give Canadians the help they need the way we will. That's what our plan is about, and I'm being straight and honest. Mr. Mulcair's plan is to actually do what we know politicians of all parties, including my own, have done in the past, which is to say we're going to balance the books, and then oops, the numbers are worse than we thought. We're going to have to break our promises. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm being honest with Canadians. We're going to run 3 deficits, and we're going to invest in the future Canadians need right now.
Mr. Harper?
Look, the whole essence of Mr. Mulcair's plan is that he says he will balance the budget through tax hikes. That's what the NDP's tried everywhere. They left Ontario in a massive deficit. They left British Columbia in a massive deficit. Manitoba is in a massive deficit. Alberta's deficit has got larger since they took office. The former Saskatchewan Auditor General says they left Saskatchewan in a deficit because tax hikes do not grow the economy. They do not create jobs. They kill jobs and they hurt revenues. And we don't want to go down that path. Now, Mr. Trudeau says we will have greater optimism by spending more. I actually think this is what Canadians fear. We don't measure our level of optimism through our level of spending. We make sure we're making investments in the things we need to, as we are doing, in infrastructure, in training, in innovation. But we do that in a way that we know we can continue to do and continue to afford without raising taxes by having a balanced budget. And I think in this unstable global economy, that is an important guarantee for people's future and why they should be optimistic.
Now, Mr. Harper, what you don't understand is what Canadians can't afford is to continue to be stuck in traffic every morning because there's no reliable transit, because the federal government hasn't stepped up as a partner. I mean, you've been stuck in a motorcade for the past 10 years, but most Canadians are actually very aware that the transit underinvestment is a drag in our economy. And I've talked with municipalities and provinces right across this country who need a reliable federal partner to step up and invest. And people, serious economists across this country have said that we have a plan that is exactly what we need. No less than the person you appointed to head up the Privy Council, Kevin Lynch, actually said, yes, a plan for investment right now is what we need. The former chair of the Bank of Canada, a list of the former parliamentary budget officers. There are many people who've said now is the time to invest, and that's exactly what the Liberals are going to do. Not because we're cheery and optimistic, but because we know that countries that believe in their future are willing to invest in their future.
Mr. Trudeau,
and that's what we're going to do.
we have the largest infrastructure investments in history right now, including major public transit announcements going on all over the country, including right in this city.
Yeah, at election time, Mr. Harper, at election time.
And those are the facts that I ask everybody to look
games.
at the numbers, to look at the numbers. They're there, and we're doing that without raising your taxes and without borrowing money. Mr. Trudeau says he has former public servants and politicians who tell him it's okay to spend more. I got to tell you something. Those people will tell you always to spend more. That's what they will tell you. You've got to be able, as a Prime Minister, to know when to safeguard the taxpayers' money.
Please, Mr. Mulcair.
Thank you, David. Our plan is based on long-term vision. We know what has to be accomplished. We are not doing like the Liberals with their short-term approach, leaving tens of billions of dollars on the backs of future generations. And you know, Mr. Trudeau, you were talking before about Stephen Harper's budgets, but you have voted for Stephen Harper's budgets. I can guarantee you I have never voted for one of his budgets, and your very first vote as a member of Parliament was to vote for his tax giveaway to Canada's largest corporations. I can guarantee you that Jack Layton and I fought that every single step of the way.
Okay, we voted against every tax break for middle class and working Canadians.
I think what we're seeing tonight is an extraordinary exchange of ideas between a now centrist NDP and a deficit-favouring Liberal Party. So I want to turn this one to Mr. Trudeau. Taxing the richest and then spending it. Why should Canadians who are already up to their eyes in debt be encouraged by your message?
Actually, we are raising taxes on the wealthiest 1% so that we can lower them, so we can cut them for the middle class. That is the shift that we feel we need. Mr. Mulcair talks about income inequality. You can hear the NDP talking about income inequality all the time, except they actually are not doing anything about it. Only the Liberal Party is going to ask people who've been very successful to do a little bit more so we can put money in the pockets of people who actually need it. That's what our approach is, because we know that that's what we have to do. But on top of that, and aside from that, we are also going to make historic investments in the future of our country, because Canadians need transit, they need roads and bridges, we need clean water and wastewater treatment systems. We need things that are going to create good jobs for Canadians now as they build them, and good jobs and prosperity going forward as our communities do better. That's what investing in our future is all about, and that's not left or right. That's what Canada needs.
Mr. Trudeau, we know that you propose what is really a fairly modest deficit against the $2 trillion national economy. What do you consider to be the biggest single challenge you face? Because when I look for the cost of your platform, I can't add it up.
We were the first party to put out a fully costed framework that said that we indeed are going to run 3 modest deficits over the first 3 years so we can balance the books in 2019. Because what Canada needs right now is growth. What we need, because Mr. Harper has been unable to deliver it, having the worst growth record of any Prime Minister since the depths of the Great Depression, is a plan to grow the economy. And you do that by investing in our communities, in transit, in green infrastructure, in the kinds of things that are going to contribute to growing the economy.
Let's go back to your idea of an infrastructure bank. Recreational centres, water facilities, are these areas that are part of the federal government's role?
The federal government's role in a country like Canada is to be a partner serving citizens with communities, with municipalities, and with provinces. We will respond to the needs that Canadians have on the ground to improve their quality of life, to build better opportunities in their cities. That is what the federal government should be. That's not what the federal government has been over the past decade, as Mr. Harper has refused to engage with the provinces, has not been a solid partner to municipalities in the transit and infrastructure investments that are needed, and that's exactly what we're going to turn around.
So
it's not up to the federal government.
We're in Alberta this evening.
Yes.
There's clear sense that structural change is happening to the economy. So again, for yourself, what will you do? What are your policies to build that new economy?
Well, one of the facts we're looking at right now is because of the challenges with low oil prices, we have construction and engineering multinational firms here in Calgary who are suddenly bidding on local contracts that they've never had the bandwidth to do before. This is the time to invest in your hometown, Mr. Harper. You need to step up, and we need to step up as a government and be there for municipalities like Calgary who are trying to create new avenues of opportunity given the cyclical nature of our commodities. This is exactly a moment to invest when interest rates are low, when our debt to GDP is low, and when the economy has been flat for 10 years because Mr. Harper hasn't stepped up for his hometown or for anywhere across the country.
Let's go to open floor, Mr. Harper.
Well, look, if I could respond to that. As I said before, we are making record investments in our infrastructure right now, including a federal infrastructure program that is rolling out across the country. But, let's be frank about Mr. Trudeau's plan. The reason Mr. Trudeau is running deficits is not because he has some underlying economic philosophy. It's because he went around the country and promised far more money than he actually had and found out that taxing a few wealthy people a little bit does not cover that. And so now he's trying to run saying deficits are a good thing. We did a lot of work to make sure we came out of deficits after the Great Recession without cutting our social programs. That's what we've done. This is a guarantee to people, to you ladies and gentlemen out there, that when we've lowered your taxes, they're going to stay down and the investments we make are sustainable. And when Mr. Trudeau gets us off the anchor of a balanced budget for no apparent reason, we know where that's, the Liberals have done that federally and in Ontario, that goes on forever and it gets worse. And that is not a risk you or our economy in this fragile economic environment can afford.
Mr. Harper, you have run deficits in good years. You have run deficits in bad years. The only time you've said the deficits are not going to be run is in election years. The fact of the matter is you stood on stages like these, looked at Canadians 3 times and promised not to bring in deficits. And yet that's exactly what you've done. The reason that we're stuck in deficits for so long is because you don't understand that giving tax breaks and benefits to the wealthiest Canadians is not a way to grow the economy anymore. We have low growth. You have the worst job creation record since World War II of any Prime Minister, and that's what Canadians are feeling. You are disconnected from people's reality. We need, once again, to get this country investing in its own future, and that's what you haven't done for 10 years.
Let me correct the facts. We ran surpluses before we had the global financial crisis. When the global financial crisis came, everyone in the world ran deficits, and we told Canadians we would run a massive stimulus program, get it out the door quickly, sustain our economy through that period, and that it would be temporary and the deficit would fall until it was eliminated. And we've done exactly that on exactly the schedule we said we would do it, and we're now in our 2nd year of a balanced budget.
Okay, Mr. Mulcair.
Why would we return to deficits now when we have an unstable global economy and we need to make sure we can assure people that the benefits are delivering?
Mr. Mulcair,
That's
Mr. Mulcair,
why.
please, Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Mulcair.
Back on July 19th, Mr. Trudeau gave a press conference at which he said he would balance the books. He would run balanced budgets nonstop.
Actually,
just
not
a
nonstop.
few weeks after that, he announced that he would run $10 billion a year in deficits. Now, you just heard him say the same thing. He was clearly criticizing the fact that Mr. Harper had run deficits, but that's exactly what he's planning to do. So I think, Justin, that it's only fair to say that when your advisors tell you one thing and another and they're totally contradictory, pick one. You just can't say them both. With regard to tax cuts to the wealthiest, your first vote in Canadian Parliament was to vote for Mr. Harper's tax cuts for the wealthiest.
Mr. Mulcair,
now you're against what you did.
Mr. Mulcair, I am looking straight at Canadians and being honest the way I always have. We said we are committed to balanced budgets, and we are. We will balance that budget in 2019 because Canadians need investment and growth
Mr. Walmsley,
right now.
there's another point that has to be brought up, which is that Mr. Harper claims that he made no cuts to social programs. I'm sorry, Mr. Harper, when you sat down with the provincial ministers and announced that you were going to be cutting the funding formula by up to $36 billion for healthcare, that's called cutting social programs.
Let's be absolutely clear on what the facts are. Under this government, our transfers for health to the provinces have risen from $20 billion
what you're planning to do, Mr. Harper. Stop denying the reality.
Increase. And that number will grow every single year into the future. It will hit over $40 billion
Mr. Harper,
by the
you
end of the
raised
decade.
the age for old age security from 65 to 67. You didn't make that announcement to a group of hard rock miners in Sudbury. You made that announcement to a group of billionaires in the Swiss Alps.
Until the year
Is that political courage?
2023. What we've done in the main
You're cutting social programs, period.
The biggest increase to the guaranteed income supplement for our most valuable seniors in a quarter century. And Mr. Mulcair, you like to talk about the fact you voted against business tax cuts, you voted against small business
Mr.
tax
Harper,
cuts,
you just made
you
a
voted
statement
against
that
tax
is
cuts for
patently
working
false.
people,
You said you never cut
poor
social
people,
programs. You're cutting Medicare, you're raising the retirement age. You know that that's not true.
For both retirement and health care, and the public accounts.
Mr. Mulcair has talked about health care transfers, but he just stepped back from that promise. He promised to increase health care transfers, and now he said, oh no, balancing the books is more important.
We are.
That's not what Canadians
very
do.
much. Thank you. We now move to the final question of the debate, and it goes to Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper, you're going to need some new ideas. The reality is the oil patch, resources in general, are going to be a smaller part of the Canadian economy. And it is clear that under your watch, Canada is no longer an international champion on many different data points. We have record household debt. We have minimal growth. And in many cases, we have stagnant wages. Why do you deserve more time?
Well, let me be clear on that. Those things are just, David, I just don't accept what you just said. You look over the past 10 years, whether it's income growth, whether it's job growth, we have done better than all the major developed economies. It hasn't been great because we are living in a terribly unstable and risky global economy. Right now, a portion of our economy is being hard hit by the fall in oil prices. That's something that concerns me. I come from here. It affects people I know personally. I've been personal friends and family for a long period of time. We'll do something about that. But to suggest for a second that that has been all there is to our policy is just false. Our policy is based on what I call the 3 T's, the 3 I's. Taxes, getting them down, keeping them down, making them competitive. Training, making sure we're investing particularly in things that we know there's labor demand for in the future. Trade. Opening up markets. We now have, through the trade agreements this government has signed, we're going to have in the future access to over half of global GDP. Investing in innovation with our manufacturers and reforming our immigration system to make it even more effective for our economy and making record investments in infrastructure. That's why I believe Canadians are optimistic if they look at the future.
Well, let's drill down on trade, for example. What do you say to the auto sector as you look at the Pacific Trade Plan?
Well, look, we know the auto sector has concerns on that particular, as do others. But David, what I say is this. We're entering the final stages of a trade discussion in the Asia-Pacific that I think, frankly, is going to conclude successfully, that is going to be the basis of the global trade network in the Asia-Pacific for the generation to come. And what I say to the auto sector in particular, I'm not suggesting they will necessarily like everything that is in that, but what I am saying is we simply cannot afford as a country to have our auto sector shut out of global supply chains. That would be a disaster. We're going to make sure we get the best deal for that and all of our sectors, but we are committed as a government to making sure we do not fall behind in our access to a global trading economy which is so integrated. If we do that, that would be disastrous for this country.
Now, you know better than most the challenges and the problems that come that can't be predicted.
Right.
You're facing an economy that is incredibly challenged, that demands new thinking.
Right.
What are you thinking of for the new economy?
Well,
how do we turn this from resources to knowledge and the sharing economy?
Look, David, I have come to work now for 7 years in a row with nothing but economic crises around the world. You know, it's a banking crisis, then it's a sovereign debt crisis, a housing crisis. We now have market chaos in China. We have the falling commodity prices. We do have to do two things. We do have to respond to these crises, but we have to operate on a long-term plan. And that is what we have been doing. And you know, that long-term plan is not just about resources, but it is also including resources. I don't want to suggest for a second that we are not going to have a vibrant resource sector. The fact that we have an unparalleled resource endowment, we have one of the highly educated workforces in the world, and we have innovative and progressive manufacturers, that we cover the complete spectrum of the economy is one of the reasons Canada is able to weather these global economic storms better than both, and we are committed to making sure that all of these sectors move forward together.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Harper. We're going to now go to Mr. Mulcair and the open floor, please. One of the questions that the Prime Minister responded to was with respect to his vision. What do you think that the NDP can do to transition our economy beyond the buffeting winds we have with oil prices, China and the US Fed today saying we're not going to raise rates again?
Well, I believe it is possible, David, to build a Canada that is more generous and more prosperous. Mr. Harper tends to believe that everybody's in it on their own. I think that we're all in this together, and I think that we should try to work hard to raise everybody up. You know, I do come from a very large family, and sometimes we're tough, but I've seen what it is when people work together and they hold together. They try to give each other that helping hand. I also know that it's high time that around the world people started looking at us differently. I want our democratic institutions respected here at home and our international reputation respected abroad. I want to make sure that every young person gets the opportunities that they need, and frankly, that our seniors get the help that they deserve. That's why we've proposed to raise the guaranteed income supplement, to raise several hundred thousand of our poorest seniors out of poverty.
Mr. Trudeau, what do you say to Mr. Harper's position that the Liberals will allow for a deficit, but then there will be slippage and that deficit gets out of control?
On the contrary, the reason Mr. Harper hasn't been able to get out of deficit is that he hasn't created growth. His cuts to and underspending to veterans programs, to First Nations, who we haven't talked about enough tonight because they're an important element in building our economy, in making sure that we're creating proper partnerships and moving our resources, as well as creating educational opportunities for young people across this country by investing, for example, on the Liberal platform, $2.6 billion in First Nations education. We have an awful lot we need to do to keep investing in growing this economy. Mr. Harper continues to think that giving tax cuts and benefits to the wealthiest Canadians will somehow create growth. Well, it hasn't, and that's why we need a change. Mr. Mulcair talks about all the right things, but he's not going to be able to actually act on them because, unfortunately, he has backloaded his promises and he's committed to balance when we don't need balance. With low interest rates right now, with a declining debt to GDP ratio, and with a flat economy, we need to invest in our future. That's what confident economies do, and that's what the Liberal Party of Canada is proposing. It's the right plan to help Canadians
Mr. Harper?
Now.
Well, look, when it came out the other day that it was confirmed by the Auditor General that we actually had a surplus last year, not just this year, but a surplus last year, Mr. Trudeau immediately came out and said, well, that's because they've cut veterans and they've cut seniors and they've cut infrastructure.
And of course, people looked
at what's actually in the annual financial statements. And spending in all of those areas has actually gone up. And the way we balanced the budget was we actually did increase revenues. We did it by cutting taxes. And I guess what I say to people is the same thing I said before. We're not saying in this fragile global economy everything is great. We have significant risks and significant challenges. What we're saying we're doing is we're making sure we're investing in the things that will cause long-term growth, and we're investing in things that help people in their pocketbooks to get education, to save, to retire. And higher taxes and permanent deficits is a risk that buys nothing for our people. And as we've got to reject that kind of a plan.
Mr. Mulcair.
Mr. Harper was elected on a promise to make Ottawa better, to change Ottawa, but unfortunately it's Ottawa that changed Mr. Harper. Corruption has actually increased, and that's part of his legacy, but also Ottawa has become a more divisive and a meaner place. Our relationships with the provinces are more divisive and meaner under Mr. Harper. He's refused to attend any meetings of the Council of the Federation. I come out of provincial politics. I know that it's part of my job, if I become Prime Minister, to sit down regularly with the provincial premiers, to work with them on important issues facing them and on things that we want to bring forward, like quality, affordable childcare. It's a different approach.
Now, one of the things that I think is fairly clear is that I disagree with these two gentlemen on a number of things. But the main thing that I disagree with them on is their lack of ambition for our country. Mr. Harper wants you to think that better just isn't possible. Well, that's not true. In this country, better is always possible. Mr. Mulcair talks about making things better, but isn't going to act on it because he has no plan to build the economy we need.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. This much anticipated Globe and Mail debate on the economy comes to an end. You've heard a wide range of different views, and in a month's time, it will be voting day. I would like to thank everyone who has joined us and made this evening possible. To Mayor Nenshi for hosting us here in Calgary. We at the Globe and Mail believe in the national debate, and I am sure that you agree that we got one tonight. Final word of thanks, of course, to the three leaders, Mr. Harper, Mr. Mulcair, Mr. Trudeau. We wish you all well. We know that you have a common interest in doing the best for Canada. You just have a different way of doing it. Stay with us. We'll be carrying the post-debate scrums later. But first, Jane Tabor of the Globe and Mail joins us now to begin the post-debate debate. I'm David Walmsley, the Editor-in-Chief of the Globe and Mail. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thanks very much, David. Well, I'm here with Adam Radwanski, and we're going to pick apart this debate. And Adam, I just have to say that was really passionate.
Aggressive, one might
say.
Well,
exactly.
Yes.
So what were the surprises for you?
Well, I'm a little surprised by how aggressive they all were through the entire thing. I mean, I think maybe that may have scored them some points in terms of passion, as you said. It may have helped them, to energize their supporters a little bit. I do wonder a bit if they missed all of them, and I thought this particularly Mr. Trudeau, but you could say about all of them, might have missed a bit of an opportunity to try to rise above the fray a little bit, maybe to connect with your average viewer who may find it a little tiring to hear them sort of yelling at each other and want them to talk a little more about issues that matter to them at home.
Yeah, you hear about that in the House of Commons all the time, that they're always talking over one another, and so we saw a little bit about that in this debate, but I took that to be that there was a lot of passion about this issue, that this was such an important issue that they had a lot to say.
I think there's that. I think there's also to some degree, we're in a long campaign here, and I think there's a degree of pent up, I don't know if frustration's the right word, but they're really in a tight pack, as we were discussing before the debate. And I think they really, they seem to want to go at each other hard.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that, in the first debate, I mean, Mr. Trudeau was probably the most aggressive person on the stage, and the other two were much more sedate, particularly Mr. Mulcair. I think we saw a bit of a return of, I hesitate to say angry Tom because that's maybe a little unfair, but angrier Tom at least.
Right.
That he seemed to be much more aggressive. He took some pretty pointed shots at Mr. Trudeau in particular, and they've clearly decided that showing passion here was more important than trying to just be nice and calm and reassuring and smiley like he was in the first debate.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the commentary and what I saw myself was a different Thomas Mulcair. I thought he was totally different in this debate than he was in the very first debate.
Completely.
And so I think if you had to say if somebody sort of excelled or rose above the top, I don't know if you can break out of the three-way tie that everyone's in now in the national opinion polls. But if there's a breakaway, I think it could go to Thomas Mulcair.
It could. I mean, I don't think any of them probably broke away quite. I actually think Mr. Harper performed pretty well. He was a little bit more pointed than he has been in previous ones, reflecting that it's a closer race and that just being the incumbent. I mean, he wasn't the center of attention the way he has been in past debates, so that wasn't surprising. He was a little bit tougher. I thought he had some pretty good lines, and I thought he did a decent job of straddling between sort of being a little more aggressive, but being reasonable and not mean. And that to the extent that he can help himself, he might have. I mean, the problem with Mr. Harper, as we've all discussed many times, is he's kind of a take it or leave it proposition at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if he would have moved a lot of people, but if there were some people to move, I think he did about, close to as well as he probably could have done.
Some of the more fiery moments that we saw were on the environment and energy, and there were some good exchanges among the leaders among the leaders. What did you see on that?
Well, that segment, right off the top, was incredibly aggressive, maybe more so, and part of that might have just been that it was at the start. But I did think there was a lot of, there's clearly a strong difference of opinion there. I actually thought that you were saying, and I agree that, in parts Mr. Mulcair did well. I actually don't know if he did himself a lot of favors in that segment, because I frankly had a hard time understanding what exactly his policy was. The other two leaders had a slightly clearer line that they were taking.
Okay, Adam, we've got to leave it there, but then, and thank you very much for that analysis. I appreciate it. Now let's go, first the Globe and Mail staff have been tweeting throughout the debate, and here's a look at some of those tweets, as well as social media insights from Google and Twitter Canada.
Now, let's go to Jane Tabor, standing by with our post-debate show.
Welcome to our Post Leaders Debate Show. I'm Jane Tabor. And with me now, again, Paul Waldy, Report on Business editor, Lindsay Tedds, an associate professor of economics at the University of Victoria, and Globe and Mail columnist and author, John Ibbitson. And together we'll critique the highlights and lowlights of the last 90 minutes. And so let's start with you, Paul. Surprises, a big highlight? What was your takeaway?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that Mulcair clearly won this debate hands down. He had the best arguments, the best retorts, and really he answered a really key question. Harper's attack on him is the constant attack you get from the Conservatives, and that is that the NDP is nothing but a tax and spend party. Mulcair's response, I thought, was pretty clever, because his response to Harper was, while you've been cutting all these taxes and all these corporate taxes and taxes on rich people, we've lost all of these jobs since 2008 and 2009, 400,000 in manufacturing alone, and the economy isn't in such great shape now. So I think he really undercut that consistent Conservative message.
Right, and that's a difference from the previous debate where we saw the Thomas Mulcair trying
he wasn't smiling. He didn't have that creepy smile on it, which was good.
I think maybe he was told to drop the smile and just get right into it. John, what did you think?
I agree. I thought we have two elections underway. It struck me as I was watching this debate tonight. And the first election is, should we elect Stephen Harper? So I wanted to know, is Stephen Harper going to come out swinging? He's going to try to move the numbers.
Right.
Is he going to try to make the election about him and his plan? No. He said, you know what? These other guys are having a whole lot of fun duking it out. I'm just going to stand here, make my points. And I think to that extent, you know, those who feel good about Stephen Harper will feel good about this debate. I don't know how many people he actually convinced who were doubtful. But then there was this second election campaign. If we are going to replace Stephen Harper with the new Prime Minister, who should it be? Should it be Tom Mulcair or Justin Trudeau? Mr. Trudeau was very aggressive. He talked over, he interrupted, but a lot of the time he kept going back to message track.
Right.
A lot of the time, look, all politicians go to message track, but it shouldn't be obvious. And sometimes it looked obvious. And I agree with Paul. The sort of the calm, measured, prime ministerial tones of Tom Mulcair really carried the day.
Well, and let's go to our economist, Lindsay Tez, and let's hear any white lies. Is there anything?
How many?
Yeah, or how many white lies?
There were a significant amount. I was very disappointed to hear Tom Mulcair say that this was the worst recession since the Depression. That's not true. This is the worst recession since the last recession, i.e. this is like the best one we've ever had. So it was disappointing to hear him fall back on that rhetoric. And then they all use this idea of small businesses being the job creators in the economy. That is not true. It is not size which matters for job creation. It is age, and there is a significant amount of research both in Canada and the U.S. that backs that up.
You're talking about jobs, and we've isolated a highlight, what we thought was a highlight during the debate of an exchange between Thomas Mulcair and Stephen Harper on jobs. Listen to this.
Mr. Mulcair, you actually are the only leader in Canadian history to have gone to another country, you and your colleagues, to the United States, to argue against Canadian jobs and against Canadian development projects.
It's exactly the opposite, Mr. Harper. It's exactly the opposite, Mr. Hold on, Mr. Wanda.
Let Mr. Trudeau and let Mr. Trudeau.
He just said something to me, and I'm going to answer him. 40,000 Canadian jobs would be exported to the United States with Keystone XL. That's not our figure. That's the Government of Canada's figure under Mr. Harper's Conservatives. I want to create those 40,000 jobs in Canada.
So that's the kind of passion that we usually see in the House of Commons. And then, yes, and we saw it, and it shows that there are at 30, 30, 30. It shows what's at stake here, because we did see that kind of aggression.
Yeah, I mean, there were two things going on there. One, obviously, was about the Keystone Pipeline project, and I think Harper used an argument he has used repeatedly against Mulcair, that he went down to argue against the Keystone Pipeline. That's a fair shot, but I think the 40,000 job exported thing is a little bit far-fetched. And I think Mulcair came back at him pretty strongly and said, you know, you're the one that's proposing this pipeline. And one of the big arguments that the Republicans have used in the U.S. for the Keystone Pipeline is all the jobs it will create down there. So I think both of them scored a couple of points there. But so in that case, you know, Mulcair comes into this only having to come out even. I think he came out ahead, so he even wins that one by default.
John, yeah, too many numbers, way too many numbers. And voters don't want to try to memorize this or memorize that. What matters is Harper, one of the few occasions when Harper actually rounded on Mulcair, tried to take him down, and Mr. Mulcair came back. He was calm, he was measured, and he took the point away from Mr. Harper.
Lindsay, do Canadians listen to that? Do they get that? Do they understand the economics behind it?
Well, I don't know. They were all talking over each other. I couldn't understand what they were saying. I'm, as the economist up here, I'm going to have to say, look, the only jobs that government creates are public sector jobs, okay? The government creates an environment with which private sector can potentially create jobs. So I think we just need to be careful about, who creates jobs and where they go and why they go, and suggest that a government has that much control over it or should take credit for them, I think is laughable.
Okay, let's move on to the second highlight or low light, however you guys want to look at it, of the night. And we're going to show you a clip of Justin Trudeau attacking the choices Stephen Harper, has made on the environment and the economy. Listen to this.
Mr. Harper continues to pretend that there is a choice between environment and economy. He chooses to say that you cannot build a strong economy if you're protecting the environment, and that has been his failure, and that has been his failure felt right here in Calgary. He talks about being the best friend that Calgary has ever had, that Alberta has ever had, but he hasn't gotten pipelines built. He has made the oil sands an international pariah, and with friends like Stephen Harper, Alberta doesn't need enemies.
Well, I think that was one of Trudeau's better attacks, the better criticisms. And I think he did come out more aggressive in this debate. I was pretty critical of him earlier in the first debate where I thought he was a bit of a, high school performer, but he was not in this one. He was better. But again, I think, John made the point that he kind of went back to the same argument over and over. This was one of the few times where he didn't. And I think he did score some points that those pipelines are not being built. Right. And the oil sands does have a real image problem, and Harper hasn't helped that.
And this is in Stephen Harper's backyard as well, where he's making that point. John?
Yeah, we've got to remember it is a 30-30-30 election. It has been now for 6 weeks. There's a very narrow band of available voters, people who might switch between the Conservatives and the Liberals, or between the Liberals and the New Democrats, or even between the New Democrats and the Conservatives. And when Justin Trudeau is sort of going on like that, I think, actually you're right, that was not a bad exchange. But at other times in the night, it sounded as though he was talking scripted points, and he was saying to those on-the-fence voters, listen to me, I can yell louder than the others, and I can make my point more forcefully than the others. I don't think he was saying, look at me, I'm more naturally prime ministerial than the others. That I don't think he managed to achieve tonight.
The economy and pipelines is...
Well, I would like to pick up on what Justin Trudeau was actually saying, is that you do not have to pick between the economy and the environment. And that is, in fact, true. There are great policies that you can put in place that ensures both the environment and economic growth. And we have to make sure that we think about long-term economic growth and not do too much now and sacrifice economic growth that we can have in the future.
Okay. Our third highlight of the night is during the immigration portion of the debate, things became very heated when Mr. Mulcair attacked Mr. Harper about his stance on refugees. Here it is.
Mr. Harper, why don't you stop using the security excuse as a pretext to do nothing? Because nobody wants to let somebody in without a security check, but you're doing nothing.
We're announcing that we're bringing in more refugees. We're announcing we're bringing them in more quickly. We're providing a matching fund for humanitarian support, because even under the most generous refugee policy, the vast majority of these millions of people will remain in those countries and will need our assistance. Those are the things we're doing.
The UN has asked us to bring in 9,000 refugees before Christmas, and you won't do it. They've asked for 46,000 over the next 4 years. You won't do it. That's the United Nations asking that, Mr. Harper.
But it is not the kind of reckless approach that these two parties are
advocating. Fear-mongering on the backs of people who need help, the most suffering in the world.
Yeah,
that's a heated issue. It's a loaded issue.
It's tough, and I have some sympathy for Harper, because Canada isn't the only country that is doing nothing or has been criticized in this issue. So it's a really difficult issue for any government.
It's been a really big issue in the last few days.
Oh, it has.
He should be able to handle himself well.
He does, but he has to weigh this balance. Look at Britain. A lot of countries are going through the exact same type of debate. It's very, very difficult. So it's pretty easy for the other two to attack, but nonetheless, this is a campaign. That happens. He's not giving an answer that's really nullifying any of those attacks, and Mulcair did the job he has to do to point that out.
Well, except that the real problem is, and there's a lot of polling on this over the last week or so, the voter is him or herself conflicted. The voter wants to bring in more refugees. We all have seen those images in Europe. We all saw that image on the beach.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that Canadians want to bring in more refugees? Because you've heard what Mr. Harper has said about the security issue.
And there's plenty of polling data to show that they do want to bring in more refugees.
It's how many more, right?
They want them to be very careful about who they bring in and how.
And that is why Mr. Harper has risen in the polls in the last little while, because of his stance on the security and the refugee issue.
But he's never going to win the argument, I'm more compassionate.
Well,
And so that's why you have this split between those, like who was saying, yeah, bring more in, but be careful. So Mr. Mulcair and Mr. Trudeau are on the bring more in side, and Mr. Harper is on the yeah, be careful side.
Yeah, but Harper only has to appeal to his base, and he does with his argument.
Yes.
The security issue
plus 5%.
Well,
right?
yeah, but on this issue, if he can keep his base happy, that's fine. He doesn't need any more on this issue. He needs them on other issues, but not on this one. The other two are going to score points and please their base. So I think it's a wash all around on this issue.
Okay, Lindsay, the economy and immigration. I mean, how important is that? It's a subject that becomes so political, yet it seems that we need immigrants here in this country.
I think there's 2 points that I'd like to make. One, when we bring in refugees, it doesn't take them long before they match the employment rates of domestic Canadians. So I think people who are concerned about refugees coming in here and them being expensive, that's not true. They more than pay for themselves once they get here and get stabilized. But immigration isn't a panacea. It's not going to reverse the impacts that we're feeling of an aging society. And we need to do more about increasing our population growth. And one thing that none of the politicians have been talking about is fertility policy and the Assisted Human Reproduction Act, which has not survived a court challenge. And there seems to be no discussion about that, and I find that disappointing.
Right. Okay. Well, we're gonna leave it there, and I want to thank our panelists. Paul Waldie, of course, is the editor of the Report on Business. And we've got our fact checker here. We're lucky to have our economist, Lindsay Tedds from the University of Victoria, and of course, John Ibbotson, the political columnist at the Globe and also the author of a new book on Stephen Harper. So thank you very much. So this is the end of our show, but there's so much more in the debate, and you can find all that, video clips, commentary, analysis, and stories on globeandmail.com. And I also want to thank our viewers for their keen interest during the Globe and Mail's debate on the economy. Now we're going to leave you tonight with a playback of the leaders' post-debate scrums, which has just happened outside this room. Good night from Calgary, and thanks for joining us.
Justin, Mulcair was taking a lot of shots at you. You seem to be his main opponent tonight rather than Stephen Harper. Your thoughts on that?
I think tonight was about presenting a plan and a vision for the future of this country. I was the only leader up there who was detailing clearly a plan for investment in our country to give Canadians the help they need, the growth they need, and the future that we want to leave to our kids. I'm very pleased with how it went.
Mr. Trudeau, you say you're being the only leader who's being straight with Canadians. So what does that mean? Are you saying that both Mr. Harper and Mr. Mulcair are lying to Canadians?
Well, we know what Mr. Mulcair's plan is. Mr. Mulcair is going to suddenly realize, if he gets elected, that, the numbers are worse than we thought and we're not going to be able to keep our promises. That's a tried and true political tactic that I'm simply not going to engage in. I've looked at Canadians. I've said, we're going to run 3 modest deficits because it's the right thing to do, to invest in the communities that we have, to invest in the growth we need. That's what I'm focused on, and that's what was clear during this debate.
Trudeau, 50% of Aboriginal people on reserve. You mentioned that First Nations hadn't been a part of the debate at all. Why didn't you bring it up earlier?
There was an awful lot of topics covered in a very short period of time, and I kept hoping that it would be brought up, but I think it's important to highlight that the fact is that First Nations have the largest proportion of young people in this country, and the future of those communities are also about the future of our country. Needing to get our resources to market, needing to develop our resources needs to happen in partnership in a nation-to-nation basis with First Nations, and that's exactly what the Liberal Party is committed to do, and I was glad to be able to highlight that in a debate that talked about many aspects of our economy, but didn't speak enough about the opportunities and the challenges faced by Indigenous Canadians.
Est-ce que c'est ça votre cadre financier? Parce que c'était l'impression que vous sembliez donner.
Tout à fait. J'ai annoncé au début de la campagne que nous allions mettre de l'avant, il y a plusieurs semaines, que nous allions mettre de l'avant un plan qui prépare des déficits modestes pour pouvoir investir dans du logement social, du transport collectif, dans les choses dont les Canadiens vont avoir besoin pour créer de la croissance, pour créer des emplois. Les autres partis le savent très bien que nous avons mis de l'avant ce cadre fiscal parce qu'ils nous attaquent dessus à tous les jours. Nous avons un plan clair pour investir dans notre pays et c'est de ça que j'ai parlé ce soir.
How did you do? How do you think you did tonight?
You know what? I'm going to leave it up to pundits to talk about who did what. I was proud to get our clear and strong plan to invest in this country, and ultimately Canadians will decide on October 19th.
Avez-vous passé votre message tout de même?
Je trouve que les Canadiens voient très clairement que nous avons un plan pour investir dans la croissance économique, dans la création d'emplois, dans l'aide pour les Canadiens de la classe moyenne, en augmentant les impôts pour les mieux nantis et en les baissant pour la classe moyenne. Nous avons un plan clair qui va sortir 315 000 jeunes de la pauvreté en donnant des allocations plus généreuses aux familles qui en ont besoin et en arrêtant d'envoyer ces chèques à des familles millionnaires. Nous avons un plan clair et je pense que tout le monde le voit après ce soir. Well, I think it's important that we're here in Calgary and highlighting that Mr. Harper has completely missed the opportunities. First, to actually get pipelines to Tidewater. For 10 years, he's supposedly the best friend that the Alberta energy industry has ever had, and yet he's been an absolute failure because he doesn't understand that the only way to get energy projects built now is to understand that you cannot separate environment and economy. Not being able to get the public trust has hurt Alberta's economy and it's hurt Canada's economy. That's why we are proposing a much better relationship with the provinces and a much better process whereby we will earn the public trust to get our resources to market. It's one of the things that a Prime Minister is supposed to do. It's one of the things that Mr. Harper has failed to do.
Mr. Trudeau, as much as you say you're being straight with Canadians, Mr. Harper says you're going to tax the heck out of them. Mr. Mulcair says you're going to leave deficits to future generations. So why should we believe you?
The fact of it is that we've actually put forward a strong plan that's very clear that we think Canadians need investment right now. We know interest rates are at record lows. Our debt to GDP ratio is low, and with the Liberal plan, even with our 3 modest deficits, will continue to decrease every year. Our economy is flat because, as you heard me say a few times tonight, Mr. Harper has the lowest growth of any Prime Minister since R.B. Bennett in the depths of the Great Depression. The fact is, now is the time to invest in Canadians, in our future, creating a better future for our kids and grandkids, and that's exactly what I was highlighting tonight. Mr. Harper and Mr. Mulcair will continue to play politics and attack as much as they can, but they haven't put forward a plan to build a strong economy, to create jobs for Canadians, and to invest in our future, and that's what the Liberal Party plan is all about.
Parce que Monsieur Harper a fait une émission ce soir pour la première fois publiquement en disant que le secteur de l'automobile ne serait pas nécessairement content de la signature du TPP, mais qu'il serait prêt à signer quand même.
Monsieur Harper démontre encore le genre de manière d'opacité et de non-transparence en matière de négociations internationales. On est très inquiet pour ce qui est en train de passer comme message et comme deal, comme négociation là-dessus. La réalité, c'est que, évidemment, le commerce international est extrêmement important, mais nous nous devons de s'assurer qu'on est en train de le faire de la bonne façon.
Your plan looks an awful lot like what Kathleen Wynne's been doing in Ontario. You obviously have a lot of advisors who come out of Ontario Liberal politics. Ontario's not doing great economically. In addition to the deficits, higher unemployment than it should be, loss of many manufacturing jobs. Is that Canada's future if they go with your plan?
Our plan is about investing in Canadians. It's about lowering taxes for the wealthiest 1%, raising taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we can lower them for the middle class. This is about investing in our future because that's what confident, optimistic countries do. They know that we are able to grow and build, and a federal government that has the capacity to should be a much better partner. That's what I'm focused on.
Sir, did you feel like you had the most to lose tonight? A lot of pundits said before this, Trudeau has the most to lose, maybe the most to gain. Did you agree?
I'm focused on presenting to Canadians a strong plan, the right plan to grow the economy and to bring people together. Unfortunately, we've seen tonight, yet again, Mr. Harper playing the politics of division. The fact that he referred to something called Old Stock Canadians, demonstrates that yet again he is choosing to divide Canadians against another, and with Bill C-24 and others is undermining New Canadians' legitimacy. For the Liberal Party, for me, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, and it will always stay that way. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Mr. Mulcair, why didn't you address First Nations economic issues tonight?
I think I was the first person to mention First Nations at all in the context of immigration, and it's a very important issue. Every time we talk about resource development in our country, it's top of mind, and there's no issue on which I've held more meetings since becoming Leader of the official opposition.
I just wanted to ask you about your fiscal framework that you put out yesterday.
Yes.
The NDP is using the price of oil at $67 a barrel. Right now, oil sits at $47 a barrel. That is a 30% difference. So why would your party use the $67 a barrel as the number?
Thanks, Christy. Well, I think the most important thing to note is that the NDP is the only party to have published a complete costing, and I'm very proud of that, and it was part of the discussion tonight. I call upon Mr. Trudeau to finally follow through and to publish his, and Mr. Harper to publish his, and then we'll be able to contrast and compare assumptions. Tonight we were able to talk about Stephen Harper's failed plan, Mr. Trudeau's short-term vision, and our long-term plan, which is included in our fiscal framework. The assumptions that are there are prudent ones. They come mostly from the Finance Department and the PBO, and they are, frankly, the best numbers available, and I'm very proud of the numbers that we put forward.
$67 is a prudent number, $67 for
The numbers that we've put forward are the best ones that were put forward by the PBO, by the Finance Department of the Government of Canada, and we're very proud of having done what the others have refused to do, which is to put forward their numbers. Go ahead.
What is the help to the economy, oil and gas in Alberta, and to students as well, where we're struggling to start our lives?
Well, it's a very important question because Mr. Harper bet everything on one sector, which was oil and gas extraction. And as we saw, it's cyclical, and we're going through the bottom of that cycle right now. Young people in Canada right now are being left a massive ecological, economic, and social debt. And Justin Trudeau's short-sighted plan would dump tens of billions of dollars of new debt on their backs. And the NDP takes a different approach. We think that we have to be responsible towards future generations. That easy.
Vous avez entendu M. Harper dire à propos des négociations du TPP que le secteur des pièces automobiles ne serait peut-être pas content de ce qui allait être conclu, mais que le gouvernement refusait de les laisser en dehors de l'accord. Est-ce qu'un gouvernement en place en ce moment, en pleine campagne électorale, a la légitimité qu'il faut pour signer un tel accord?
Je pense que M. Harper devrait être prudent en négociant dans le dernier droit de cette entente transpacifique, parce que je lui ai écrit pour lui demander d'appuyer inconditionnellement la gestion de l'offre, et il a refusé de le faire. Donc, on a des familles qui sont propriétaires de fermes laitières, avicoles et les fermes à travers le Canada qui sont très préoccupées par son refus d'appuyer sans condition notre système de gestion de l'offre. Et oui, pour ce qui est de la fabrication des pièces d'automobile, écoutez, là, le bilan de M. Harper pourrait difficilement être pire. On a perdu 400 000 bons emplois depuis que M. Harper est là. Et il veut mettre en péril 80 000 bons emplois dans le secteur de la fabrication des pièces automobiles. C'est un non-sens. Alors, on est très préoccupé par son attitude.
Mr. Harper saying that Notley is causing job losses, and that's what you would do as the Prime Minister.
Well, you know, Mr. Harper seems to forget that the Conservatives were in power in this province for over 40 years, and Rachel Notley's got a very constructive, positive plan to start cleaning up some of the mess that was left here after more than 40 years of Conservative rule. And the province is in such a difficult situation right now because Stephen Harper has made a series of wrong-headed choices that have negatively affected all Canadians, including people here in Alberta. And I'm very concerned, and I understand the distress of the families here in Alberta. People have lost, we've seen a lot of job losses. The economy as a whole has gone through great problems, but it's the people. You know, anytime you talk about a lost job, it's a family that's been affected. And I'm very concerned about the situation here, but we'll be a champion for the resource sector, but we'll make sure that the development continues responsibly and sustainably.
You seem to have a lot of lines.
You found a ticket to Calgary?
Absolutely. I came to see you.
Good to see you.
You seem to have a lot of lines aimed at Justin Trudeau. You had some zingers at him. You seem to be spending more time fighting with him tonight than with Mr.
I don't know.
Harper.
I haven't added up the time, but I can tell you this. This was an opportunity tonight for Canadians across the country to compare and contrast, to look at our long-term plan that is frankly responsible and it's sustainable and it's transparent because we've published our numbers and people know that it's prudent. And we can contrast that with Mr. Trudeau's short-sighted approach where we take everything for today and let tomorrow take care of itself, and we leave a massive debt on the backs of our children and grandchildren, and Mr. Harper's failed plan, because as you know, Brian, there are 300,000 more unemployed today than when Mr. Harper's first recession hit in 2008, and 400,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost. And when I hear him say that the auto parts sector might not be happy with the results of the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiation, which is taking place right in the middle of an election campaign, which is a problem in and of itself, I'm worried for the 80,000 jobs in that sector as well. And so, you know, we've got to get back to a Canada that has jobs that are enough for a family to live on, where people can expect a decent pension at the end. Unfortunately, that's not Stephen Harper's Canada, but that's the kind of Canada I want to build. Je vais prendre une autre question en français parce que j'ai fait presque exclusivement en anglais.
Monsieur Trudeau a eu beaucoup de temps pour défendre ces 3 déficits d'affilée. Avez-vous l'impression que le tapis est en train de vous glisser sous les pieds parce que les Canadiens semblent finalement pas trop contre cette idée-là?
Madeleine, on ne peut pas dire une chose et son contraire comme M. Trudeau le fait depuis le début sur la question des déficits. Le 19 juillet, il a dit qu'il allait avoir budget équilibré après budget équilibré. Là, tout d'un coup, ses conseillers lui ont dit on va plutôt promettre dizaines de milliards de dollars année après année de déficit. Là, le public est en train de se demander à quoi ça rime parce que M. Trudeau refuse de publier ces chiffres. Notre plan, long terme, se contraste avec cette vision à courte vue de M. Trudeau où il refuse de chiffrer ses promesses. Et M. Harper, on peut tous le constater, son plan a complètement failli. M. Harper, c'est un échec. 400 000 bons emplois du secteur manufacturier perdus. 300 000 chômeurs de plus depuis qu'il est là. Moi, je suis très content d'avoir eu l'occasion ce soir, à travers vous, de parler avec un grand nombre de Canadiens, puis faire contraste avec la vision courte vue de Justin Trudeau, la vision long terme du NPD et le plan qui est un total échec de M. Harper. Et sur ce, je vous souhaite une super bonne soirée. Merci.
This concludes tonight's debate livestream. Thank you for watching the Globe and Mail Leaders Debate 2015. Good night.